Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where soap is suspicious, your doctor might bleed you just to see what happens, and if you live to 30, you're basically a miracle. This is Tudor England, an age of splendour and squalor, where kings build palaces while peasants boil moss to eat. And you're going to be one of those peasants. Sorry, but you probably won't survive this. You might make it to the ripe age of 3, maybe. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I mean, I'm not forcing you, I'm not Henry VIII. Also, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this little bedtime caravan travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're being born in the year 1534, in a one-room cottage stuffed with 8 other people, none of whom smell great. The ceiling is low, the walls weep dampness, and the floor is packed mud topped with rushes that haven't been changed since last harvest. There's a bed, sort of. Really, it's just a large wooden frame stuffed with straw, fleas and regret. Your mother is giving birth in the corner, squatting on a pile of old linens while the local midwife mutters prayers and instructions that sound suspiciously like spells. There's no screaming, no one has the strength for that, just heavy breathing and the wet slap of life arriving. The baby is you, purple, wrinkled, and not crying yet. The midwife flicks your foot and mutters something about God's breath. You finally wail. Everyone exhales. You're alive, for now. You're immediately swaddled in cloths and passed to your mother, who looks more exhausted than joyful. She's already lost 2 children to fever, 1 to a winter cough, and another to bad humours, whatever those are. There's no placenta inspection, no sanitising instruments, just some warm beer to wash it all down. No one questions that. Beer is safer than water. Now your journey begins. You lie in a cradle near the fire, wrapped so tightly you can't move your limbs. This is intentional. Swaddling is believed to prevent crooked limbs and misbehaviour. You share the room with chickens, a goat and 3 coughing siblings. A cat stares at you from the rafters. It might eat your face if you're left unattended. This is not a joke. It's happened. The smell is unforgettable. A mix of smoke, sweat, mildew and animal droppings, all marinating in the stale air of an unventilated room. Your mother can't read, but she can recite herbal remedies and saints' names like her life depends on them. Because it does. When she's not nursing, she's boiling nettles to treat your father's infected foot or scraping mould off a barley loaf to feed your siblings. Food is scarce. Warmth is even scarcer. The hearth is the centre of life, literally and symbolically. Every breath tastes like peat smoke and ash. You're baptised within days, not because your family is especially pious, but because babies die all the time, and if you go unbaptised, well, it's purgatory for you. Forever. Nobody wants that. The local priest dips your head into a basin that's been used for 10 other babies this month, and says some Latin words your parents don't understand, but they nod solemnly. It's done. Now you are officially a member of the church, and more importantly, recorded somewhere. A name, a soul, a line in the parish book if the scribe remembered. You're one of the lucky ones. Some babies never even got that far. This early phase of life, these first few weeks, is basically one long audition for staying alive. Half of all children in Tudor England won't make it to age 5. You might die from teething fever, or because someone gives you the wrong herb. You could be accidentally smothered by a drunk aunt falling asleep too close to the cradle. Or maybe a rat nibbles your toes. The danger doesn't stop just because you've been born. It starts. One historical fact here. In Henry VIII's England, the average life expectancy hovered around 35-40 years. But that number is wildly skewed by infant mortality. If you made it to 10, your odds improved dramatically. The big hurdle was, well, not dying immediately. Here's a fun or rather horrifying fringe fact. Some midwives would bury the placenta under the hearthstone or garden, believing it would protect the child's soul. Others burned it. If you were born during a storm, that might mean you were cursed, or blessed. Interpretations varied. One unlucky baby born during an eclipse was immediately declared a changeling and left in the woods. You, thankfully, were born on a sunny Tuesday. And even at this early stage, there's a scholarly debate that quietly rumbles through academic circles. How much did Tudor parents actually care about their infants? Some argue emotional attachment was limited until a child showed signs of survival, like making it past toddlerhood. Others say love isn't limited by context. that grief, though differently expressed, was still deep and real. Evidence for both exists in letters, wills, and church records. But no one can say for sure. For now, you sleep squirming in your little bundle, listening to the crackle of the fire, and your father cursing about the state of his boots. Your mother croons a song about St. Agnes while plucking lice from your sister's hair. In the world outside, kings make laws and wars over airless thrones, but in here, life is measured in mouthfuls of stew and coughs that linger too long. You've survived your first night. That's something. You'll need to do it again tomorrow, and the next night, and the next winter. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see 5 candles on a cake-shaped oat loaf someday. You're still alive, and that's worth noting. Most babies around you haven't been so lucky. Some of the tiny graves in the churchyard don't even have names carved into the stones, just crude crosses or little clumps of flowers someone stuck in the dirt out of habit. Infant death is as normal as rain. There's no great outpouring of public grief, no black armbands or long funeral processions. A baby dies and another is born a few weeks later, and sometimes that one dies too. Life in Tudor England is fragile, so fragile you wonder how anyone manages to become an adult at all. You're about 18 months old now. That's enough time to learn how to wobble around barefoot on a floor caked in soot and straw. You pick up things you shouldn't, lick things you definitely shouldn't. You put your hand in a bucket that definitely used to have milk in it and now just has something green and fuzzy. No one stops you. People are busy. Children aren't coddled, they're mostly ignored until they can work or talk, or both. One of your siblings, a sister named Joan, didn't make it past her 3rd winter. Fever, your mother said. But really, it was probably the cold, the damp, or maybe even malnutrition. Your parents wrapped her in the same linens you were swaddled in, and took her to the churchyard in silence. Your father dug the hole himself with a borrowed spade. The priest said a few words. Then everyone went home and tried not to talk about it. The family still has 6 mouths to feed. There's no time for mourning. You start to notice that every time someone in the village starts coughing badly, people avoid them. They won't say the word outright, consumption, but everyone knows what it means. If it's bad, the afflicted person disappears from the home, taken to a separate cottage or shed where they usually die alone. Later the local bailiff or priest burns the bedding. You see smoke and you know someone's gone. It's grim, but that's how it is. Your own health isn't great. You've had a runny nose since, well, forever. You cough sometimes, but nobody really notices unless you stop breathing altogether. You're fed bread, porridge, and the occasional boiled turnip. On Sundays, maybe a bit of cheese. Meat is rare unless a pig dies, and even then, every part of it gets used, including bits you wouldn't want to name. You're given ale to drink, not because anyone's trying to raise a toddler alcoholic, but because ale is safer than water. Everyone knows water makes you sick. At night, you sleep beside your siblings, all crammed into the same bed, like firewood stacked to dry. You'd think the body heat would help, and it does, but it also means lice, fleas, and the occasional mouse making a dash across your legs. Sometimes the roof leaks, dripping cold rain on your face while you sleep. No one fixes it. They can't. Thatch is expensive, and the landlord won't pay for repairs on a tenant cottage. Here's a historical fact for you. In the 1500s, child mortality was painfully common. Records from the period show that in some regions, nearly 60% of children died before the age of 5. Many of those deaths went unrecorded, especially among peasants. Diseases that are manageable now, measles, dysentery, whooping cough, were often death sentences. Even teething was considered a cause of death, partly because no one understood the real infection lurking behind the fevers. And then there's the fringe fact. Some people believed children were more vulnerable to death because they were still close to the spirit world. In parts of rural England, if a child died suddenly, the mother might burn the child's hair and scatter the ashes in the river to confuse the spirits and keep them from taking another. Others hung herbs over cradles, rosemary, sage, mugwort, not to heal the child, to confuse death itself. There's even debate among historians about how deeply these early losses affected parents. Some argue that high mortality desensitized families to death. You couldn't afford to fall apart every time a child passed. You had to keep going. Others, examining letters and diaries, suggest the pain was no less real, just hidden. A father might carve a wooden doll in memory of a lost son. A mother might keep a scrap of swaddling cloth hidden in the rafters. Love existed, but so did survival. And survival didn't leave much room for open sorrow. As you wobble into your 3rd year, you begin to understand certain things without being taught. Don't eat the bright berries near the hedge. Don't touch the fire. Stay away from the pale woman who talks to herself. She's either mad or cursed, and either way she's dangerous. When the priest visits, bow your head and pretend you've been good. When your mother tells you to be quiet, be quiet. Her face has shadows under the eyes, like sleep has long since forgotten her. Your father barely speaks anymore. He goes to the fields, comes home, chews his supper, slowly, and stares into the fire like it owes him answers. And then, one morning, a scream. Your little brother, just 8 months old, is cold and blue. No one saw it coming. One night he was breathing. Now he's not. Your mother sobs quietly while your father stares at the door. This time there's no priest, just another hole, another wooden cross, and the strange sensation that this is becoming normal. You survive that winter somehow. Your bones are thin and your cheeks are hollow, but you've grown. You've made it to the age of 3.5. That's something like adulthood around here. You can carry firewood, fetch water, and chase chickens back into their pen. You're not just a mouth to feed anymore, you're useful. And in Tudor England, usefulness is life insurance. You're 4 now, and that's practically ancient by Tudor standards. You can speak clearly, though you mostly parrot adult words, some of which are not meant for small ears, and your legs are strong enough to run errands across the village. Your first job, unofficial but vital, is to help your mother gather herbs and dig through hedgerows for things that might pass as food. Nettle, dandelion greens, a mushroom or two if someone braver than you swears they're not the deadly kind. Sometimes your mother picks roots or flowers and mumbles under her breath as she does so. She says prayers to saints, but also mutters things her mother taught her, words older than Christianity, buried deep in the mud of England's ancient past. You don't question it. You learn by watching, and you're starting to realise that people here survive by walking a razor-thin line between the sacred and the suspicious. Your mother keeps a bundle of dried herbs hanging by the hearth. She calls them helpful, but she never explains what they're for. Sometimes she crumbles them into boiling water and makes your father drink it when his stomach's bad. Sometimes she rubs a smelly salve onto your chest when you wheeze at night. You've been sick off and on all winter. It rattles in your lungs when you breathe, and your ribs poke out like fence slats. But the salve helps. Or maybe it doesn't. It's hard to tell. Either way, she keeps making it. There's an older woman in the village named Goody Harrow, and she's the one people whisper about when the usual remedies stop working. Your mother says not to tell the priest if you've visited her. She lives in a little hut with no windows, all slanting walls and mossy stones. You're taken to her one night when your fever spikes, and she touches your forehead with her cracked ice-cold hands. She gives your mother a bundle of herbs and tells her to burn them while you sleep. You wake up the next day, not better, but not worse either. The healing methods of Tudor England are improvised, to put it kindly. If you're poor, like your family, doctors are for other people. What you have is the local wise woman, part healer, part folk magic practitioner, all based on a mix of inherited knowledge and half-remembered superstition. She might tell your mother to rub a toad's leg on your stomach or make a poultice out of goose fat and lavender. She doesn't charge money, just bread or firewood. Here's your first solid historical fact tonight. Most medical care in Tudor England was handled by women at the local level. Licensed physicians were few, expensive, and largely confined to cities or the nobility. For everyone else, treatment came from family knowledge, herbal lore, and midwives. Many of these remedies were surprisingly effective. Willow bark for pain, honey for wounds, but the line between healing and heresy was thin, and one wrong word could get at a woman like Goody Harrow accused of witchcraft. And that brings us to our fringe fact. One popular cure for childhood fever involved roasting a live pigeon and placing its warm body on the soles of the child's feet. Why? Heat transference, allegedly, or sympathetic magic, or maybe just sheer desperation. Didn't work, obviously, but it gave people the sense that they were doing something, which, in a world where powerlessness was the default, meant everything. There's another layer here too, one modern historians still argue over. Did these folk healers truly believe in the magical side of their work? Or were they simply using the language of belief to keep from being punished? Some think women like Goody Harrow were spiritual, channeling generations of pre-Christian customs in secret. Others think it was all practical, the magic just a protective disguise so the church would leave them alone. The records are muddy because many of these women couldn't write, and the ones who did leave behind testimony were usually being interrogated under threat of death. Back in your little cottage, you're recovering. You can breathe again without that wet rattle in your chest. Your mother's salve worked, or the pigeon trick, or God intervened. It's impossible to know which. All you know is that the ache in your bones is gone, and food tastes like something again. Your family celebrates your recovery with a stew heavy on onion and hope. Someone even brings over a strip of dried meat. It's a good night. You sleep beside the hearth, wrapped in your father's old coat, and dream of green fields and sheep that don't bite. As you grow, you start to notice how illness weaves in and out of daily life like fog. No one expects to stay healthy for long. If someone isn't actively coughing or vomiting, they're usually nursing a wound, a boil, or a mysterious ache in the back. People talk about humours, those mythical bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, that apparently govern everything from your mood to your bowel movements. You don't understand the science, because there isn't any. Just theory, old books, and long-held assumptions. You're beginning to understand that most of surviving here means simply not dying today. You don't get better so much as you stop being worse. You learn to spot the first signs of a failing body, the pale face, the glassy eyes, the slow walk. You learn too that when someone disappears for a few days, the family doesn't talk about it unless pressed. It's safer that way. You don't draw attention, you don't tempt fate. Eventually, the church bell rings for another villager. You don't know who it is, but you do know that no one will be buried in a box. The dead are wrapped in linen and placed directly in the earth. If they're lucky, a priest says words over them. If not, just dirt and silence. You've survived yet another bout of illness. Your mother credits Saint Winifred, but you're starting to suspect that sheer stubbornness is your real patron saint. The village mutters about another fever spreading near the port, something brought in by travellers or soldiers, or a bad wind from across the sea. But for now, you're upright, fed, and mostly free of boils.
You count that as illness?
You're 6 now, which means you've earned the right to carry heavy things and get blamed for things you didn't do. You're small but wiry, fast enough to avoid the back of your father's hand, and just old enough to understand that your body is not quite your own. It belongs to labour. You haul water from the well in a bucket nearly half your weight. You trudge through frostbitten mud to gather firewood. You wash your own face, though no one notices if you skip. Bathing is rare and reserved for special occasions. Like plague season or Lent. Your teeth hurt sometimes and you have no idea why. One morning you wake up with your cheek swollen and throbbing like someone hit it with a rock. The pain pulses through your jaw and into your head until you can barely think. Your mother pokes around your mouth with a wooden spoon, mutters something about bad air, and tells you to chew on cloves. It helps, barely. A few days later the swelling goes down, but the pain stays. You don't know it, but there's probably a rotting tooth in there, festering from the inside. Welcome to dental care in Tudor England. Your village doesn't have a barber surgeon nearby, but you've heard tales. These men do a little bit of everything: cut hair, let blood, pull teeth, lance boils. If someone dies during a procedure, it's chalked up to the will of God. The barber surgeon's tools are few: a rusty blade, some tongs, maybe a cup of strong ale to dull the pain. Toothache is common, even among children, and often the only treatment is extraction. No anaesthesia, no antiseptic, just grit and someone to hold you down. You've seen a man get a tooth pulled once. He screamed like a butchered hog. The crowd laughed, but it stuck with you. His face after, pale, shaking, his mouth a mess of blood and spit, and you're fairly certain the man walked around with a rag in his mouth for a week afterward. You decide to live with the ache instead. Then there's your stomach, which never quite feels right. Some days it growls with hunger. Other days it twists in cramps that make you curl up near the hearth, moaning quietly. Your mother brews a bitter tea made of yarrow and fennel. It helps. Or maybe the pain just passes on its own. Your meals are rough: dense bread, root vegetables, and the occasional spoonful of lard or beans. You eat what's available, which is rarely what's healthy. Here's your first historical fact of the night. Digestion was a massive problem in Tudor England. The diet of the poor was dominated by starches and low-quality grains, often contaminated with mould or insects. Fibre content was high, but protein and fat were scarce. Without refrigeration, meat was often salted beyond recognition or eaten on the edge of rot. Dysentery, food poisoning, and chronic constipation were common afflictions. Most people assumed stomach troubles were caused by imbalanced humours, bad air, or God's punishment for gluttony, not bacterial infection or poor hygiene. And now, your fringe fact. Some Tudor cures for bowel troubles included powdered brick, crushed snail shells or mixtures of mercury and honey. If you had diarrhea, you'd be told to eat roasted mice. If you were backed up, a popular remedy involved inserting a clove of garlic into your, well, let's just say it didn't go in your mouth. You're too young for most of these treatments, but if you were older, someone might already be preparing the mouse. Even the air around you feels sick. You're used to the smell of waste and smoke, but lately it clings heavier in the mornings. Your home has no chimney, just a hole in the roof, so the soot builds up along the beams and drops black flakes into your food. You breathe smoke with every meal, every sleep, every prayer. You're already coughing again. There's a debate among scholars now about how people managed chronic health issues in this period without breaking down completely. Some argue they didn't. They simply accepted pain and discomfort as part of life. Others believe there was a quiet resilience built on community care and low expectations. Still, there's no getting around it. Most Tudor peasants lived in bodies constantly on the brink of collapse. You try not to complain. Complaining makes people angry, and you've learned to keep your head down. Pain is private, weakness dangerous. Everyone around you is tired, thin, and vaguely unwell. There's no one to pamper you. If you want to lie down when there's work to do, you better be dead. Occasionally, someone in the village will disappear for a while, sent away to a monastery for healing or to the next town over if they have family there. They return hollow-eyed and limping, no healthier than before. You realise that healing is more about surviving than recovering. If you're not actively dying, you're expected to be on your feet. One day, while playing near the edge of the village, you see a cart pass by. A man slumped in the back, clearly very ill, covered in sweat, his skin an eerie grey. The driver doesn't stop, just throws a handful of herbs into the road behind him, a superstition to ward off contagion. Your friend Thomas tells you that man has the bloody flux, a polite name for diarrhea so violent it turns fatal. You clutch your stomach instinctively. Later that evening, you ask your mother why the man wasn't helped. She doesn't answer right away. Then she says, "Sometimes help just spreads the sickness." You nod, though you don't understand, but you will. You go to bed early that night. The fire is low, and the room smells of damp wool and boiled onions. Your teeth still hurt. Your belly groans. You curl into your straw mattress, press your hands to your aching face and try not to cry. Crying gets you nothing but a harsh whisper. Quiet. You'll wake the baby. So you lie there, eyes open in the dark, counting the coughs around the room like stars in a sky you can't see. You survive another day somehow. The tooth still aches, your stomach still burns, but you're upright and breathing. And in Tudor England, that's what passes for good health. You're 7 now, and death has become something you recognise by smell before sight. It has a distinct sourness, like meat left in the sun and something metallic underneath. You get a whiff of it when you pass the cottage at the far end of the village, the one with the shuttered windows and door barred from the outside. You've heard whispers. The plague is back. No one says it outright at first. That's how it always starts. Denial wrapped in prayers and superstition. A few people coughing, a sudden rash. Then one by one doors close, curtains stay drawn. The bell in the chapel starts ringing more than usual, and you begin to notice the silence. No children playing, no laughter, just footsteps on wet earth and the occasional hollow knock as someone leaves bread on a doorstep and runs. You don't fully understand what plague means yet. You just know it makes people disappear. You hear the grown-ups talk in hushed tones. They say things like, the sickness, or the pestilence, and sometimes they just make a sign of the cross and go silent. You ask your mother why people are covering their mouths with cloth soaked in vinegar. She tells you it keeps the bad air out. You ask what the bad air is. She doesn't answer. Soon enough, someone from your own cottage starts coughing. It's your older brother, Will. He's 14, practically a man, and he never gets sick. Until now. The coughing starts low, dry, then comes wet and rattling, and then he's too weak to get out of bed. Your mother makes a paste of mustard seeds and goose fat and smears it on his chest. It doesn't help. Nothing helps. Within days, he's burning with fever, muttering nonsense and clawing at the air like he's trying to push something away. Then the black swellings appear, one under his arm, another at his groin. Your mother says nothing, just kneels and prays. You're told not to go near him, but your bed is only a few feet away. You hold your breath when you sleep, like that's going to save you. One morning, he just stops breathing. That's it. No dramatic final words. No peaceful slipping away. Just a gasp. and silence. The entire cottage goes still, like the walls themselves are holding their breath. Your father wraps Will's body in a cloth and carries it out. He doesn't cry, you've never seen him cry. He digs the grave himself. He doesn't want anyone else near it. No priest comes this time. No one wants to risk getting too close. Here's a historical fact. Plague outbreaks were a regular occurrence during the Tudor period, especially in the cities, but rural villages like yours weren't spared. The bubonic plague hit in waves throughout the 16th century, with major outbreaks in 1518, 1545 and 1563. These weren't isolated events, they were part of daily life. People didn't understand germs or contagion, but they knew the signs: boils, fever, sudden death, and they feared them more than anything else. And here's your fringe fact for tonight. One cure for the plague involved strapping a shaved chicken to the swollen area of the body. The idea was that the chicken would draw out the poison. Another option? Stuffing the mouth with crushed emeralds or applying a paste of dung and rose oil. Unsurprisingly, none of these things worked. But people tried them anyway, because fear and hope are close cousins. The scholarly debate here is about what people actually believed caused the plague. Some say it was seen purely as divine punishment, God's wrath for sin. Others argue people were more pragmatic than that, blaming foul air, unlucky stars, or contaminated goods. There's even evidence of proto-quarantine measures, especially in cities. Entire households would be boarded up, forced to ride it out alone. You've heard those stories. People nailed inside their homes like coffins. Not all of them dead, at least not at first. Back in your village, the sickness doesn't stop with Will. 3 more cottages go quiet. At least a dozen people die in a fortnight. The baker's wife, 2 of the tanner children, even the smith's apprentice who was just married. The graveyard fills up so fast that the priest begins burying people in a field just outside the church walls. No markers, just mounds of fresh earth and flies. People become desperate. They light fires in the streets, hoping the smoke will purify the air. They burn herbs and carry them in pouches around their necks. One man even walks around with a dead hedgehog on a stick, claiming it will ward off death. You laugh at first until he drops dead 2 days later. Your own health holds, for now. You try not to breathe too deeply. You stay close to your mother, who now carries a rosary and mumbles prayers almost constantly. She's also started washing everything with vinegar, including you. It stings your skin, but you don't argue. It's the first time she's been so eager to clean anything, which makes it all the more terrifying. Weeks pass, then the sickness begins to slow. People still die, but not every day. The air doesn't feel so thick with fear. You step outside one morning and realise you can hear birds again. You'd forgotten they sing. Eventually life resumes, though not as it was. Too many faces are missing. Too many homes stand empty. You ask your father when things will go back to normal. He looks at you for a long time before saying, "This is normal," and you believe him. One evening, you and your younger sister find a heap of rags under a hedge while looking for firewood. It's a woman, dead, no one you recognise. You run home and tell your mother. She doesn't go look. No one does. Eventually someone buries her near the road with no ceremony. She has no name here, no family, just another victim that the village quietly folds into its collective memory and then tries to forget. You start sleeping with your face tucked into the crook of your arm. A habit, like hiding from the air itself. You're always listening for coughs, you flinch when someone sneezes, and you know deep in your child's bones that it's only a matter of time before the plague returns, because it always does. The only question is whether you'll be lucky enough to dodge it next time. The stink hits before you even open your eyes. It seeps into your dreams, wet, sour, and unmistakably human. You blink awake in the murky dawn and realise the wind shifted during the night, blowing the smell straight through the cracks in your cottage walls. The smell of the street. More accurately, the smell of everything people don't want in their homes. Rot, dung, urine, and the occasional dead rat that nobody's bothered to move. You stretch, careful not to bump the sleeping body next to you, your little sister clinging like a barnacle for warmth. You step barefoot onto the rushes, which are less floor covering and more filthy mulch. They haven't been changed in months. They are soaked with spills, droppings, and whatever's fallen from the table or your siblings' mouths. You don't really notice anymore. Your nose has given up. Outside, the village is already half awake. There's a chorus of chickens, goats, and someone shouting about a runaway pig. You push the door open and are instantly greeted by the raw tang of the open sewer. Sewer might be generous. It's just a trench that runs down the middle of the street filled with everything people toss from their windows. Chamber pot contents, spoiled stew, fish guts, and anything too foul or wet to be burned. You join the parade of children with buckets, off to fetch water from the nearest stream. The stream is muddy, sluggish, and runs about 10 feet from the spot where people wash their clothes. Just upstream from where people dump their waste. You don't think about that part. No one does, not really. You just drink ale when you can, and hope today's water won't give you the flux. Every so often, someone slips into the street trench. When that happens, everyone laughs, then throws a bit of lime powder after them, as if that'll purify the shame. Once it was your cousin Henry, and he came out with a broken arm and an eye infection that never quite healed. He still smells faintly like a privy when he sweats. Your own privy is a wooden box behind the cottage. No door, just a curtain. The pit beneath it was dug 5 years ago and never properly cleared. Now it bubbles when it rains. You've learned to hold your breath and go quickly. The flies are always there, waiting. Here's your historical fact. Sanitation in Tudor England was abysmal by modern standards. Towns and villages relied on open ditches, cesspits, and chamber pots emptied into the streets. The wealthier might have indoor privies or servants to deal with waste, but most people live shoulder to shoulders with their own filth. Disease spread rapidly in these conditions, especially in warmer months. The phrase "don't drink the water" wasn't advice, it was survival strategy. And your fringe fact? There were professional gong farmers, men whose job was to dig out and remove human waste from cesspits and latrines. It was dangerous, toxic work. Some died from the fumes alone. They were paid well, but no one wanted to stand near them at church, which is fair. Imagine spending your evenings waist-deep in 200 people's digestive regrets. There's debate among historians about how aware Tudor villagers were of the health risks around them. Some say people knew dirty streets led to sickness, even if they couldn't explain why. Others argue hygiene was mostly about smell. If it stank, it was bad. If it didn't, it was fine. That's why perfumed herbs were considered cleaning tools. But it's possible people were more attuned than we think. After all, they saw what happened when the filth piled up too high. They just didn't have the means to fix it. You watch your neighbour dump a bucket out her window, something brown and viscous that hits the trench with a sickening splash. She shouts, "Gardaloo!" just a second too late, and a passing boy gets a splatter across his boots. He curses, kicks a chicken, and keeps walking. You wonder if anyone ever really gets used to this. Once a week, the whole village pretends to clean. Rushes are half-heartedly changed. The priest gives a sermon about cleanliness being next to godliness, which is rich considering he smells like wet wool and boiled eggs. People sweep their doorsteps, mostly pushing muck towards someone else's doorstep. It's all theatre. Your mother scrubs the table with a damp rag and ashes. She yells at your younger siblings for tracking in mud, which is funny because there's more mud inside than out. She hangs the laundry in the smokehouse to air it out. It comes out smelling like bacon, which is at least an improvement. Rain makes everything worse. It doesn't wash the filth away, it just turns it into soup. The trench floods, spreading its contents through the streets and into lower homes. Your cottage is raised a few inches, which is the only thing keeping your floor from becoming a toilet. You've spent entire afternoons shoveling muck away from your doorway, gagging the whole time. And don't even get started on the rats. They're everywhere, under the floorboards, in the thatch, sometimes scurrying over your legs at night. You know someone who woke up with bite marks. She's fine, mostly. Still, every now and then you catch yourself finding comfort in the routine of it. The stink is constant, yes, but predictable. The trench gurgles, the pigs squeal, the chamber pot sloshes. Life goes on. You tell yourself it's better than freezing to death or starving. You remember hearing a story about a man from the city who tried to build an actual sewer? Tunnels, pipes, the works. People thought he was mad. Others accused him of witchcraft. He died before it was finished, probably from breathing in whatever he was trying to drain. You wonder if he was just ahead of his time, or just tired of stepping in human filth every morning. You fall asleep that night with the window shutter cracked open. The wind shifts again, and the smell recedes slightly. For a moment the air is clean. Not good, not fresh, but not awful. You take a deep breath. Your sister farts in her sleep. Back to normal. You've noticed something strange in the village lately. It's not just the return of the coughing, or the way the priest keeps blessing everything in sight. It's how people start looking at each other when someone shows up too clean. The baker's wife washed her hair last week, properly washed. with lavender soap her cousin sent from London, and now half the village crosses the road to avoid her. A clean person in Tudor England? Suspicious, possibly unnatural, maybe even witchy. Bathing isn't common, not because people love being filthy, but because hot water is a luxury. Firewood is too precious to waste on filling a wooden tub for one person. When someone does bathe, it's usually because they're sick or about to die, or in very rare cases, getting married. You've had about 2 full baths in your life so far, and both times involved intense scrubbing, a near scalding pot of water, and everyone in the house watching you like it was a public event. More often, you settle for wiping your hands and face with a cloth dampened in vinegar or rainwater, maybe scented with rosemary if you're feeling fancy. There's a girl named Alice in the next cottage over who's known for being odd. Not in any loud way, she's quiet, really, but she wears clean shifts and brushes her hair every morning with a comb made from bone. She smells like mint and soap, but people whisper. Too clean, someone mutters. Trying to hide something, says another. One day a chicken dies in her family's yard. No reason, just keeled over. By nightfall, someone's scratched a cross on her door in charcoal. The message is clear, we're watching. Your mother tells you to keep your fingernails dirty on purpose when you go out. She says, if you look too tidy, they'll say you've got secrets. You ask, what kind of secrets? She doesn't answer. Here's your historical fact. In Tudor England, people believed that opening the pores with hot water could let in disease. Bathing, especially in public bathhouses, had fallen out of favour since the plague years and was associated with sickness, vanity, and even sexual immorality. Personal hygiene focused more on changing linen undergarments and using dry washing methods, herbs, powders, and rubbing with cloths. Cleanliness was a matter of smell, not soap. And your fringe fact? Queen Elizabeth I famously hated baths, and once bragged that she only bathed once a month whether she needed it or not. Some nobles had perfume gloves to keep over their noses during court events, and many carried pomanders, spheres filled with sweet-smelling herbs, to ward off foul air and foul company. Smell in their minds was health. There's a debate among scholars about whether this association of cleanliness with danger was a product of misunderstanding disease or a deeper cultural value. Some argue Tudor people did notice that water sources were unsafe and drew the wrong conclusions. Others say the aversion to bathing had more to do with morality, cleanliness as pride, pride as sin. Either way, people who bathed too often were looked at sideways, especially if they were women. You start to notice how tightly people cling to their own filth, as if it's a shield. Dirty hands mean you've been working. Muddy clothes mean you belong. Scrub yourself too smooth and suddenly you're suspect. If you're poor and clean, you must be hiding something. If you're a woman and clean, well, that's even worse. Could be vanity, could be sorcery. Your mother gives you your monthly scrubbing, and you howl like you're being skinned. She's not gentle. She uses a rag, coarse and stained, and some lye soap that smells like old grease and herbs. It stings your skin, and you hiss and squirm, but she doesn't let up. She mutters the entire time. Not prayers, not curses, just a low, tired hum. The water in the basin turns grey, then brown. You try not to look. Afterward, she wraps you in an old shift that was your brother's, now patched and threadbare. You look better, feel better, but you're ordered to go roll in the dust outside before anyone sees. You do it. You've learned not to argue. There's something else too, the fear of being seen, caring about your appearance. That's almost worse than being clean. It reeks of ambition. People like you aren't supposed to care how you look. Looking nice is for nobility, for city women with powdered faces and painted lips, not for children of mud and ash. The last girl who tried to wear a flower in her hair got it ripped out by another girl, who said she looked like a French whore. Neither of them even knows what that is, but the insult worked. You think about Alice again, the girl who brushed her hair. Someone said she'd been caught whispering to the woods. Someone else claimed she had eyes like a cat's. Last week you saw her carrying a bundle of herbs with red berries. Dangerous ones, the kind your mother tells you not to touch. You try not to think about what would happen if something else died in her yard. You start skipping the vinegar cloth in the mornings. Better to stink like the rest of them. At the next Sunday service, you sit with your family in the back of the church. The priest delivers a long sermon about vanity and the devil's favourite temptations: perfume, painted lips, clean hands, hands. He talks about Eve and temptation, how the devil knows a fresh face when he sees one. Your mother nods grimly. You look at your hands and feel shame for scrubbing too hard last time. A few rows ahead, you spot Alice. Her hair is tied back. Her skin looks pale but clean. You wonder if she'll be accused of something soon. Witchcraft, pride, anything will do. All it takes is a dying cow or a sour loaf of bread, and someone will need a reason. You fall asleep that night itchy from your dust bath, but at least you're safe. You stink like everyone else. You blend in. You've made yourself forget what it feels like to be clean. And in Tudor England, that might be the difference between staying invisible and staying alive. You're 8 now, and today you're chewing something your mother calls pie. You use that word loosely. The crust is more like wood than bread, and what's inside tastes questionable. It might be meat, but no one knows from where. It's salty, slightly sweet, and smells faintly of wet feathers. You don't ask questions, you just eat it. In Tudor England, the first rule of food is, if it doesn't smell like death and hasn't moved in the last hour, it's probably fine. Meals are an adventure. Not the fun kind either. The kind where you don't know if you'll spend the night quietly digesting or curled in a ball by the fire praying to vomit your soul out. Your diet, like most villagers, consists mainly of pottage, stale bread, hard cheese, and whatever your family can catch, trade, or scavenge. Sometimes it's barley broth thickened with turnip skins. Sometimes, on special occasions, it's a rabbit that someone found snared in the Lord's woods. That's poaching, of course, and technically punishable by death. But your father just mutters, God helps those who help themselves, and hopes no one talks. You're always hungry, not starving, not exactly, but never satisfied. Your stomach has learned to ignore itself. You know that food won't be better, only different. And often different means more confusing, like the time your mother cooked something she called a black pudding, which turned out to be boiled pig's blood with oats. You tried to cry, but she made you eat it anyway. You admit it wasn't the worst thing you've eaten. That honour goes to the dried herring from last spring, so salty you drank from the chamber pot by accident. Just a sip. Still, a dark day. Let's dig into some history, literally. Meat in Tudor England was a luxury for the poor. It was expensive, hard to preserve, and mostly reserved for holy days or when something dropped dead. Rich households dined on venison, swan and roasted boar. You get pig scraps, offal, or the occasional pigeon if someone's a good shot. Fish is more common, but only because the church demands meatless days. And salted fish is cheap. Never mind that it smells like punishment. Now for a tasty fringe fact. There was a real market for mystery pies, baked goods sold by street vendors with fillings of indeterminate origin. Cat, crow, little of both, maybe. The crust was designed less for flavour and more to preserve what was inside, acting like a lidded food coffin. In wealthier circles, cooks sometimes placed live birds inside pies so that, when opened, they'd fly out. It was supposed to delight dinner guests. You can't help but imagine being pecked in the face by a pigeon during dessert. There's a debate among historians about whether Tudor villagers knew how risky their food was, or whether they simply had no other choice. Some argue they relied heavily on communal memory. Certain berries caused hallucinations, certain meats made you sweat green, certain mushrooms never left the gut. Others suggest that people rolled the dice every day and learned by watching who died. In a world where spoiled food was better than no food, a little food poisoning was just part of the package. Back to today's meal. The pie has a chewy bit that might be fur. You swallow it whole. Your mother says it came from the travelling butcher's cart. You've seen that cart. You've smelled it. You're not sure anything that comes off it should go into a human mouth, but then again, your mouth has welcomed worse. One time your cousin found a chunk of cheese with blue mould all over it. Everyone hesitated. Then someone said, "Maybe that means it's aged." You all ate it. No one died. You called it victory. Preserving food is its own dark art. Your cottage has a smoke shelf where meat hangs over the hearth until it's dry and leathery. In summer, flies try to colonise it. In winter, it turns to stone. There's also salting, which requires more salt than your family can usually afford, so often it's a very light dusting, a suggestion of preservation. Fruit is rare and usually dried, unless it's from your own tree. You once spent an entire day gathering crab apples, only to have most of them rot in the storeroom. The rats enjoyed them more than you did. Drinks, ale, small beer and cider, light stuff for everyday sipping. Water's off the table unless you want to roll the dice on diarrhoea. Milk is for children, and even that's a gamble unless it comes straight from the animal. Wine is for the rich or the clergy, and you're neither. You dream of meat sometimes, veal meat, fatty, tender, served warm and covered in gravy. The kind only noblemen or city merchants get to eat. In your dreams, you don't just eat it, you hoard it. Hide slabs of roast beef under your bed. Build forts out of loaves. Wake up chewing your blanket and wishing it were a sausage. Once a month, your father manages to get his hands on something fresh from the forest. Usually rabbit, sometimes partridge. The whole family gathers for the skinning and roasting like it's a sacred rite. You barely taste the meat. You just remember the heat of it, the way grease ran down your fingers. That night, everyone sleeps full and warm and quiet. You wish it would last longer than a night, but it doesn't. The next day, it's back to bread that bends instead of breaks, porridge that clings to the spoon like shame, and the endless cycle of wondering if today's meal is food or just something pretending to be. Still, you eat, you always eat, because if you don't, your body will start eating itself, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. You chew the hard crusts, you swallow the gristle, you close your eyes during the bad bites and hope it settles well. And when your stomach groans in protest, you smile and say, better than nothing, because that's what everyone says. In Tudor England, every meal is a gamble, and so far you've been lucky. You're 9 years old now, and it's finally happened. You got careless and drank water. Not ale, not cider, not the bitter barley tea your mother insists cures wind in the gut. Actual water, from the village stream. It looked clear enough, and you were thirsty, and you didn't feel like hauling the ale keg on your own. And now you're curled up behind the hearth, clutching your belly, sweating like a salted pig at it, and praying to every saint you can name, even a few you might have made up. The pain comes in waves, sharp cramps that double you over, followed by the waves of cold sweat and the kind of gurgling noises you usually hear from dying animals. Your mother says it's the looseness, which sounds polite. You call it what it is, a disaster. The next day you can barely walk. You're pale, trembling and lightheaded. Your mother wraps you in a wool blanket, which somehow makes you sweat more. Then she pours you a concoction of boiled sage and charcoal. You gag. She holds your nose and forces it down anyway. Better out than in, she says, like that's helpful. You've been to hell and back, and it smells like river water and fear. Here's your historical fact. Tudor villagers understood that water could make you sick, even if they didn't know why. They thought it had to do with bad air, evil spirits, or the corruption of humours. Germ theory was still centuries away. What they did know was that people who drank water often died, so they drank ale instead, weak, low-alcohol beer brewed at home or in small village breweries. It was boiled during brewing, which killed off most pathogens, making it safer than even the clearest spring. And your fringe fact? Some believed the safest way to avoid illness from water was to bury a blessed silver coin at the riverbank. Others swore that if you crossed yourself 3 times and spat into the stream, it would forgive you for drinking it. Superstitions like this weren't just weird, they were insurance policies against a world that rarely gave second chances. There's ongoing debate among scholars about how much Tudor people actually believed in water's danger versus how much they just avoided it out of habit. Some argue they were perfectly rational in relying on ale, not because of spirits or superstition, but because centuries of collective experience told them water was a gamble. Others suggest the water taboo was part of a wider distrust of anything natural that hadn't been blessed, boiled or beaten into submission. Either way, water became the enemy in a country that had more of it than it knew what to do with. You recover. Barely. It takes 3 days before you can stand up without seeing black spots. You lose weight you couldn't afford to lose. Your legs feel like broomsticks. Your mother starts pushing more ale on you than usual, not because she wants to celebrate your survival, but because she wants to prevent your relapse. The stream still flows, of course. It always does. Children still play near it, skipping rocks, catching frogs, sometimes even washing their feet. You glare at it now when you pass, like it personally betrayed you. You'll never forget the feeling of that first gut twist. The quiet horror of realizing that something as simple as a sip could nearly end you. Meanwhile, life goes on. You're still expected to help with chores, hauling buckets, chopping firewood, collecting animal dung for fuel. It's not glamorous. Your hands are cracked from frost and covered in splinters, and your nails are always dark with grime. Every time you pass by the well near the edge of the village, you give it a wide berth. The last time someone drank from that one, a whole family fell sick. The priest tried to bless the water afterward, but no one really trusts it anymore. It smells like iron and dead leaves. You hear a story about a woman in another village who claimed she had a talking well. She said it warned her when the water turned sour, Naturally, she was later accused of consorting with devils and driven out of town, probably for the best. In Tudor England, you either keep your weird thoughts to yourself, or they burn you for them. You begin to notice something else. Those with access to better water, like the manor house where the steward has a private spring, don't get sick as often. They bathe even, sometimes twice a month, and it doesn't seem to kill them, but no one talks about that. The rules are different for them. What's poison for you is refreshment for them. Nobles can afford to gamble with water. You cannot. Still, there are moments, hot summer afternoons or dry autumn mornings, when the stream looks beautiful. Sparkling under the sun, slow and glassy, filled with the flicker of insects and drifting leaves. You want to trust it again. You know better. But you want to. Once, your younger sister dips her cup in the stream while you're not watching. She takes a sip. You panic, wrestle the cup from her hands and dump it out like it's venom. You spend the rest of the day hovering near her, waiting for the cramps to start. She doesn't get sick. Not this time. You still don't let her near it again. Your mother tells you to trust your instincts. If the water smells wrong, don't touch it. If it looks too clear, be suspicious. It might be hiding something. If it bubbles when it shouldn't, run. Water. The most basic thing in the world. It gives life. It takes it away just as easily. And in your world, it's not the refreshing stream from a storybook. It's the quiet killer that waits for a thirsty child to forget. You've learned your lesson. You'll never forget. So you go back to drinking warm ale, bitter and flat. It tastes like sour bread and old wood, but it doesn't make you curl up behind the hearth begging for mercy. You raise the mug with both hands, gulp it down, and tell yourself it's fine. Because in Tudor England, survival isn't about what tastes good. It's about what doesn't kill you. You're 10 now and breathing has become a gamble. Not in the choking on a bone sort of way, though that's always possible given the texture of last night's bread, but because the very air around you feels like it's trying to crawl into your lungs and kill you. The sky is grey more often than not, and when it isn't, the smoke from every hearth in the village fills in the gaps. You don't think of it as pollution. No one does. It's just air. It stinks of burning peat, damp wool, rotting rushes, and whatever your neighbour's cooking or failing to cook. And in winter, it's even worse. Inside your home, the hearth is the centre of life. It's always going, day and night, boiling porridge, heating water, drying boots, baking bread, roasting scraps. But it also belches smoke straight into the room. There's no chimney, just a hole in the thatched roof and a prayer that the wind doesn't blow it all back down. The smoke creeps into everything, your clothes, your lungs, even your dreams. You've developed a dry cough. Nothing too terrible yet, but persistent. Your mother says it's just the season. Your father says it's because you don't cover your mouth when you sleep. But the truth is that everyone's coughing. The entire village sounds like an infirmary. You hear it all day and sometimes at night. Harsh barks from the elderly, wet sputters from the children, wheezing gasps from anyone who's made it past 40. It's like the background music of Tudor life, just less catchy and far more contagious. Your cottage is no better than outside. The walls weep when it rains, and the ceiling sags with damp that never quite dries. Mould blooms in the corners like some secret garden nobody asked for. You wake up with your nose clogged, your throat raw, and your fingers stiff from cold. But it's the air that gets you first. You try not to breathe too deep, as if rationing your lungs. Here's your historical fact. Tudor homes, especially among the poor, were notorious for being dark, damp, and smoke-filled. Chimneys were uncommon until the late 16th century. Most cottages had open hearths and low soot-blackened ceilings. Respiratory illnesses like bronchitis and tuberculosis were rampant. Children were especially vulnerable. The poor air quality, combined with close quarters, made infection nearly impossible to avoid. And here's your fringe fact. Some people believed that sleeping with a dead toad around your neck could prevent chest ailments. Others hung dried mole corpses above the hearth to absorb sickness from the air. And yes, people also burned dried dung, horse or cow, believing the smoke had healing properties. You've smelled it. You don't feel healthier. There's still debate among historians about whether the concept of bad air, miasma theory, helped or hurt Tudor health practices. On one hand, it encouraged people to avoid foul smells and keep certain areas clean, at least in theory. On the other, it completely missed the mark on how disease actually spread. People might air out a room by opening a window, but only to chase away a ghost or an evil odour, not to stop the spread of germs. Still, some miasma practices, oddly enough aligned with real science. But Tudor folks didn't need science to decide air could kill you. They just had to take a deep breath and wait. On certain days, when the fog rolls in thick from the hills and mixes with chimney smoke, the village turns into a ghost world. You can't see 10 steps ahead, and everything smells like wet ash and dog. People walk with cloths tied around their mouths, especially those who remember the last plague wave. You do too, though you were younger then. You still remember the smell of the dying, not just the people, but the rot they left behind. You wonder if it smelled worse than the air today. Hard to say. Your mother boils a pot of pine needles and rosemary, hoping the scent will drive off whatever's in the air. It helps a little, until the wind shifts and smoke pours in again. You're told to go outside and get some fresh air, which is hilarious, because the only thing fresh outside is a particularly vigorous pile of animal waste steaming by the road. You've learned to recognise the different types of coughs. There's the wet cough that sounds like drowning, the dry one that rattles like stones in a pot, the gasp cough that comes from someone whose ribs hurt when they breathe. You know them all. You've had them all. Your sister coughs in her sleep now. Count the beats between each one just in case she stops. There are moments when you wish for wind, real wind, strong enough to blow all of it away. But on still days, the air just sits, heavy and accusing. It tastes like ash and old wool, and you breathe it anyway. Because what choice do you have? You hear rumours from the next town over. Someone tried to trap bad air in bottles and bury them near the woods. Another claimed he could brew a potion that made you immune to mists. A third wore a wooden nose shaped like a hawk's beak stuffed with spices and garlic. You wonder if any of it worked. You suspect not. One night, as you're coughing into your sleeve, your father throws a handful of herbs into the fire. They hiss and spit, and the smoke turns sweet for a moment. He says it's a warding measure. Clears the bad humours. It smells like burned sage and cheap hope. Still the cough eases. Whether it's the herbs or exhaustion, you don't know. You curl up beside the hearth with a warm brick near your feet and your sister's hand in yours. The fire flickers, the smoke snakes upward, and the room fills with that thick, choking warmth you've known since birth. Not clean, not fresh, but familiar. You fall asleep breathing it in, because in Tudor England the air doesn't wait to kill you. It just takes its time. You're 11 now, and you haven't had your own bed in your entire life. That's not unusual. No one you know sleeps alone, not even the priest, and he is technically supposed to be above all that. Beds in your world aren't soft havens with pillows and sheets and space to stretch. They're shared platforms of straw, sweat, snoring and limbs, where sleep is less about rest and more about enduring until sunrise. If you're lucky, you get a corner. If you're not, you wake up with someone's foot in your face and a flea circus running laps across your scalp. Your family's bed is a wooden frame packed with straw and covered with a woolen blanket that's older than you. Most nights it holds your parents, you, and at least 2 of your younger siblings, plus the occasional cat, a warming brick, and any small items too valuable to leave unattended. There's a hierarchy to who gets what position. The adults get the edge, close to the fire. The younger kids get the middle. Where it's warmest, you, as one of the older children, get the drafty side. Your back is always cold as sleep comes in shifts. You don't go to bed and wake up like they say people do now. Instead, you sleep a few hours, wake up in the middle of the night for a bit, talking, praying, maybe even eating, and then drift off again. Everyone does. There's even a word for it. First sleep and second sleep. You're never sure which one you're in. The sounds at night are constant. Someone always coughs. Someone else grinds their teeth. You've learned to sleep through your father's snoring, your mother's muttering prayers, and the occasional wet bed from your little brother, who is supposedly too old for it now. When that happens, you all shuffle over to a drier section of straw and try not to breathe too deeply. Here's your historical fact. Beds in Tudor England were a communal space, not a private one. For the poor, entire families, sometimes with servants or livestock, shared a single sleeping area. The idea of personal space didn't exist. Even in wealthier households, people often shared beds with siblings, cousins or guests, especially in winter. It was practical, warm and completely normal. Privacy was for secrets, and secrets got you accused of something. And here's your fringe fact. In some regions, it was common to bury a dried toad under the bed to ward off nightmares. Others hung iron tools above the bed frame to keep away spirits, or left shoes under the bed facing opposite directions so wandering souls wouldn't know which way to go. You once tried putting your shoes like that after a particularly bad dream. Your mother yelled at you for tracking in mud and tossed them out the door. There's a scholarly debate over how much sleep people in the Tudor period actually got. Some believe people were naturally polyphasic, sleeping in multiple chunks instead of one long stretch. Others argue that what looks like interrupted sleep in old writings may have just been restlessness caused by discomfort, hunger, or the need to stoke the fire at night. Either way, you're pretty sure no one in your village wakes up feeling refreshed. Bedtime itself isn't marked by a clock because no one has one. It's just when the fire burns low and your mother starts telling you to shut your eyes, whether you're tired or not. Light is expensive, candles are precious, staying up means wasting fuel, the sun rules your schedule, and once it's gone so are your options. Sometimes in the dead of night you wake up and find someone missing from the bed, usually your father. He sits by the hearth, staring into the embers, drinking weak ale from a wooden mug. You ask if he's okay, he says, "Just thinking." You don't ask what about. Grown-up thoughts are like frost, they bite when you get too close. You've had nights where you're too cold to sleep, even with bodies all around you. The wind finds every crack in the wall, and the fire sputters low, and you can feel your toes going numb. Your mother wraps a wool cloth around your feet and tucks you tighter into the huddle. It helps, a little. The next morning you wake up with straw in your mouth, and your sister drooling on your arm. She kicks in her sleep. She always has. There are no pillows, only bundled cloth or a folded apron, if your mother's feeling generous. Some families use sacks of grain or old bread loaves. You've heard about goose feather pillows, but you've never seen one. You assume they're something royalty uses to suffocate dissenters. And just in case you thought sleep might be the one peaceful part of Tudor life, allow us to remind you, lice, fleas, bed bugs, things that crawl on your skin and bite in the night. Your mother boils the bedding when she can, once a season if you're lucky, but they always come back. Always. You wake up scratching, red welts on your legs, little tracks down your neck. You squish them between your fingernails and compare blood smears with your brother. It's a game, a disgusting one. Sometimes when a relative visits, or worse, a travelling stranger, you have to give up your space entirely and sleep by the fire, or in the loft, or in the barn. You don't complain, because a warm barn with a friendly cow is better than a cold floor with a snoring uncle who smells like turnips and sin. You dream strange things, dark forests, boiling pots, a house that breathes. You've never heard the word nightmare, but you know what it is. You wake up panting, cold with sweat, and listen to the others breathe. Still alive, still here. You reach out and touch your sister's arm, just to be sure. One night, the roof leaks directly onto your leg. You shift in your sleep and the water seeps into your shift, icy and sour. You don't even bother moving. You're too tired. The next morning you wake up soaked and freezing. You ask if anyone else got wet. Your father shrugs and says, "It's just the season." You shiver into your clothes and hope the sun shows its face. There's no comfort in your sleep, not really, but it's something. A pause, a short escape, even if the escape smells like smoke and damp wool and unwashed bodies, even if it's shared with elbows and knees and coughing mouths. You sleep because you have to, and you wake up because someone stepped on your head, and that's just how it is. In Tudor England, dreams aren't a luxury. They're another place to survive. You're 12 now, and the cold has teeth. It's the kind of winter that sneaks in through every hole in the wall and settles in your bones like it plans to stay there. Your breath hangs in the air like a ghost, even inside the house, and the rushes on the floor feel like walking on ice cabbage. You've started sleeping in your clothes, not because you're lazy, but because removing them would mean a brush with hypothermia. Everyone in your family has started to resemble layered onions, shirts over tunics, scarves tucked into collars, hands stuffed deep in sleeves. You'd laugh if your lips weren't cracked and bleeding. There's no central heating, obviously. The hearth is your only defence, and it can barely keep itself going some nights. Firewood's too precious to waste. Every stick has to be scavenged, bartered or hacked from the hedges with permission, or more often without. You've spent more hours than you can count out in the woods with your father, kicking frozen branches and dragging bundles of kindling back with hands so numb you had to check them by sight to make sure they were still attached. The worst part is getting up in the morning. The blankets, however rough and lice-ridden, hold just enough warmth to make leaving them feel like a betrayal. Your breath fogs as soon as you sit up. Your shift clings to you like wet parchment. You hop from foot to foot as you dress, trying not to cry out when your fingers touch the icy buckle of your belt. Your boots, stiff with frost, feel like you're shoving your feet into blocks of cheese left too long in the cellar. Your mother tries to keep spirits up. She roasts onions with salt, a sort of treat, and hands out scraps of wool to use as hand warmers. Your younger siblings huddle around the hearth like rats around a lantern. One of them, your brother Thomas, has started coughing again, the deep kind that rattles through the ribs. Your mother dabs vinegar on his chest and wraps him in whatever dry cloth she can find. You know the look in her eyes, she's worried. She doesn't say it, but everyone's worried in winter. It's the season of losing. Historical fact time. Tudor winters could be brutal, especially during what we now call the Little Ice Age, a period of colder climate that lasted into the 17th century. Poor families lived in barely insulated homes, stone walls without mortar, thatched roofs full of holes, wooden shutters that let in more wind than they kept out. Winter wasn't just inconvenient, it was deadly. Fuel was limited, illness surged, and many simply didn't make it to spring. Fringe fact, some people believe that sleeping with a sprig of ivy under your pillow would keep you warm through the night. Others swore by hanging a bit of pig fat near the door to keep out the cold spirits. There was even one old tale about stuffing your shoes with dried nettles to keep frostbite away. You tried that once. It didn't help, but it did keep rats from chewing the leather. So a win? There's debate among historians about how much of the winter struggle was due to climate versus poverty. Some argue that Tudor people were more resilient and adapted, living on stews, staying active, wearing layers of wool and linen. Others point out that for the poor, adaptation often meant freezing a little slower, not avoiding the cold entirely. Your lived experience lands firmly in the second camp. You're not enduring winter. You're surviving it in daily increments. Outside, the landscape is hushed and white. Snow turns everything soft, but it also hides danger. You've slipped on frozen puddles, fallen through thin ice, and once nearly lost a boot in a snowdrift. Still, you have to work. Water needs hauling, animals need feeding, firewood needs fetching. There's no such thing as a snow day. Your family's wool garments are all patched, threadbare and damp at the edges. Once, a traveller passed through wearing fur. Real fur. You stared at him like he was a bear in human clothes. The man caught your gaze and winked. You still think about that. What it must be like to be warm all the time, to go through winter without cracked lips and chilblains on your hands. You can't imagine. One night your father shares a bed story that sticks with you. He says a man in a nearby village froze to death in his sleep right beside his wife. She didn't know until morning. She thought he'd just gone quiet. You wonder how anyone ever sleeps soundly in the cold knowing it might be the last. You do your part to stay warm. You stuff straw into your boots. You sleep curled tight like a grub. You even tuck hot pebbles under your blanket when the fire's hot enough to spare them. Still, some nights the cold feels like it's inside your lungs, breathing with you. You dream of fire, but it never warms you. The church offers no comfort. It's colder in there than outside. Stone walls, stone floors, stone benches. You sit through sermons, shivering so hard your teeth knock together. The priest tells you to pray for warmth. You consider praying for more firewood instead. Sometimes your mother sings at night, not to entertain, just to fill the silence. The kind of lullaby passed down from mothers who knew what it was like to bury a child in January. It's not cheerful, but it's comforting in its own way. Eventually the frost begins to retreat. The ice melts, the ground softens, the air doesn't bite quite so hard. You're not warm exactly, but you're not frozen. Your brother's cough lingers, but he's still breathing. The rats stop coming inside so much. The snow turns to mud, which somehow feels like a blessing. You survived another winter. That's more than some can say. You're 13 now, old enough to be useful in the eyes of everyone around you, old enough to be treated like an adult in the ways that matter least and worked like one in the ways that matter most. The village doesn't care about birthdays, but the lines on your palms have grown darker, and your hands have started to callous from constant labour. This morning your mother ties a worn cord around your wrist and mutters, "You're strong enough now, time to earn your bread." You've been helping with chores for years, of course, but now comes something else entirely. Service. There are no apprenticeships waiting for you, no candle-lit reading lessons or promising trade routes. You're being sent to the manor house at the edge of the woods to serve, not serve under someone, just serve full stop. The steward offered to take in another body for the season, and your parents jumped at the chance. One less mouth to feed at home, one more set of hands to fetch and carry and scrub and bow. You don't even get to pack a bag. There's nothing to pack, just the tunic you're wearing, a patched cloak and a hunk of dry bread your mother presses into your hand like a blessing. You walk to the manor through icy mud, heart racing, not with excitement. but with the quiet dread of knowing you're entering a world where you won't matter. At least not in any way that counts. The manor is the largest building you've ever seen. Tall stone walls, real glass windows, and a roof that doesn't leak. There are servants here who've never spoken to their own masters. You learn quickly that you're not even the lowest of them. You're below the kitchen girl, below the boot boy, even below the dog. The steward doesn't learn your name. You're called you or boy, even though you're not a boy anymore. Your job? Everything. You wake before dawn to help haul wood, sweep floors, shovel waste from the animal stalls, pluck feathers from birds, clean chamber pots, and stand silently until someone tells you to move. You're not allowed to speak unless spoken to. You're not allowed to sit unless told, and you're not allowed, under any circumstances, to make eye contact with anyone wearing a hat made of felt or better. Here's a historical fact. In Tudor England, it was incredibly common for children as young as 7 or 8 to be sent into domestic service, especially in rural villages. This wasn't seen as cruel, it was necessary. Families couldn't afford to keep feeding mouths that couldn't work full-time. Working in a manor, however harsh, often meant more consistent food and shelter than you'd find at home. It was also a grim kind of social training. Service prepared you for a life of obedience and scarcity. And your fringe fact? Some lords and ladies believed that young servants absorbed household spirits, and they were used almost like living talismans, tucked into corners to listen for bad omens or misfortune. In certain homes, young maids were even ordered to sweep under beds 3 times a day to chase away evil thoughts. You've been told nothing that mystical, just to stay out of sight when the guests arrive. There's an open debate among scholars about whether life in service was an opportunity or a quiet sentence. Some point to rare cases of clever boys rising through the ranks to become stewards or merchants. Others argue that for the vast majority, service was a grinding, soul-numbing system of unpaid labour under the illusion of upward mobility. In your case, it doesn't feel like a stepping stone. It feels like a long hallway with no door at the end. Still, there are moments, brief quiet ones, that feel survivable. You discover that the cook slips you bits of pastry if you keep your mouth shut. You learn which floorboards squeak and how to walk silently in the hall. You learn the difference between being invisible and being unnoticed. One keeps you safe, the other gets you blamed for broken dishes you didn't touch. You make friends with a scullery boy named Matthew, who's been here 2 years and has the haunted look of someone who forgot how to dream. He teaches you how to scrub silver so it shines just enough without looking too expensive. He also teaches you the secret of the warm cupboard in the laundry room, where the heat lingers just long enough to thaw your fingers on icy mornings. Your sleeping space is in a corner of the pantry. No bed, just a folded cloth and a nest of rags behind the grain barrels. It smells like oats, mildew, and old onions. Better than the floor near the privy where Matthew sleeps. Better than outside. The days bleed into each other. You lose track of time. Every task blends into the next. The lady of the house never speaks to you. The master nods once, maybe by accident. You bow anyway. Your back aches constantly. Your fingers are raw. Your feet never stop hurting. You write your name in dust on the kitchen wall one night just to remember you exist. It's gone by morning, but there's food, and for now, that's enough. You eat better than you did at home. Warm stews, scraps from noble tables, even the occasional bit of fruit when someone isn't looking. You still eat quickly in silence, as if someone might take it away. Old habits don't die, they just kneel with you at the foot of the Lord's stairs. One night you dream of home, of your siblings asleep in a pile by the hearth, of your mother's hand stroking your hair. You wake up with tears crusted on your face and the sound of the steward shouting for more kindling. You don't have time to miss anyone. You have work to do. So you roll off your rags, tie your belt tighter, and shuffle back into the kitchen before the sun rises. Another day of service. Another step towards survival. In Tudor England, your childhood ends the moment you're useful. And you? You're very useful now. You're 14 now, and the village has started to look at you differently. Not as a child, not even really as a servant, but as someone of marrying age. That phrase gets tossed around with unnerving frequency, often with an elbow to the ribs or a too loud chuckle from someone missing half their teeth. You laugh along when you have to, but it doesn't feel funny. It feels like standing at the edge of something sharp and irreversible. You're not even sure what marriage is exactly, but you know it has less to do with love and more to do with grain, goats, and surviving another winter. Your parents start hinting. Joan's girl is nearly 15, your mother says over her stitching. not looking at you but very much talking about you. She'll be wed by Michaelmas if she's lucky. Your father just grunts. He's more concerned with whether you'll marry someone who owns a plough. Marriage in Tudor England isn't the romantic ideal you'll find scribbled into sonnets. It's a transaction, a negotiation, a reshuffling of mouths to feed and hands to work the land. If you're a girl, marriage is expected early, sometimes as young as 12 or 13. If you're a boy, you'll be expected to marry once you can prove you can support someone, which in your case is, let's just say, debatable. You don't even own your own boots. You've started to notice the girls in the village more, or maybe you're just noticing how they are being noticed. Anne, who you used to chase geese with, now walks slower and speaks softer. Someone braided her hair last week, and that seemed to change everything. Now she's spoken of in lowered tones. Her hips are being watched like they're about to make grain grow. You hear things, quiet things. She's of age now. A fertile-looking girl. Her mother's preparing her linen chest. You wonder if Anne knows what's coming. You wonder if she cares. You also wonder what it would be like to be told, without question, that your life's path now includes someone else's body, someone else's name, someone else's children. It doesn't seem like she'll get to wonder much longer. Your own name has come up a few times. Not that anyone's rushing to hand you a dowry or a house key, but your mother says you should start thinking of your future. By which she means, find someone who won't beat you senseless, and maybe owns a goat. It's a low bar, but in Tudor England it's practically romantic. Here's your historical fact. Most lower-class women in the Tudor period married in their late teens or early 20s, though betrothals could happen much earlier. Marriage was not based on love, it was economic. Families considered land, labour and lineage. For women especially, it marked a shift from one form of dependency, childhood, to another, wifehood. If a girl was lucky, her husband was only 10 years older and had both his ears. And your fringe fact. There were local rituals for matchmaking that ranged from the oddly sweet to the borderline unhinged. In some villages, eligible young people would sleep with a slice of cake under their pillows in hopes of dreaming of their future spouse. In others, they'd peel an apple in one long strip and toss it over their shoulder. The shape it landed in would reveal the first letter of their lover's name. You once tried the apple peel trick and it landed in the shape of what might have been a snake. You decided to stay single that week. There's scholarly debate about how much agency young people really had in marriage decisions. Some historians argue that parents controlled everything. Others believe the lower classes had more flexibility, so long as the match was reasonable. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. Your parents wouldn't marry you off to a lunatic, but if a half-decent Thatcher with all his teeth came knocking, you'd probably be traded for 2 goats and a blessing. You watch a wedding in the village square one Sunday. The bride is barely 15, stiff and pale in a linen shift someone embroidered hastily with flowers. The groom is 28 and smells like fish. She flinches when he touches her hand. People cheer anyway. There's ale and music, and the priest talks of duty and children and obedience. You think you hear the bride's mother crying quietly in the back. Later you ask your father if that's what marriage always looks like. He shrugs. Better than starving alone, he says. You're not sure that's the rousing endorsement he thinks it is. You begin to notice the lines between affection and expectation. A boy and a girl laughing too long draws eyes. A shared glance is enough to start whispers. You find yourself staring too long sometimes. You can't help it. It's a new kind of hunger, not just for skin or heat, but for choice. The idea that you might get to pick who touches you. That maybe, just maybe, you could be wanted for more than what you bring to a field or a table. You know better, though. Choice is a luxury you don't have, and affection is a risk. So you keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your glances short. One evening, Anne vanishes. Just gone. Her mother says she's visiting cousins in another village, but everyone knows that's not true. A week later, a man in his 30s shows up and starts building a small lean-to near the edge of the fields. No one says it out loud, but now everyone calls it Anne's place. You don't see her again. Not for months. And when you do, she's round in the belly and grey in the face. She doesn't look happy. She doesn't look stale. She just looks resigned. That night your mother prays over you, not out loud, just her hand on your shoulder, tight and warm. You don't ask what she's saying, you think you already know. In Tudor England, marriage isn't the beginning of a love story. It's just the next stage in survival. And whether you want it or not, it's already watching you from across the field. You're 15 now, and whether you're ready or not, your body has taken the reins and galloped off into the territory you never asked to visit. You wake one morning with a damp ache low in your belly, and everything you wear feels too tight, too hot, too much. Your chest has changed, your voice too, in its own subtle way, less chirp, more rasp. Your mother watches you like she's counting down to something inevitable. She doesn't say much, but her eyes follow you with the weight of someone waiting for the roof to cave in. And then it happens. Blood. The first time it terrifies you. There's no warning, just the warm rush, the stained shift, and the quiet, creeping fear that something inside you has split open. You call for your mother in a whisper. She comes, sees the red, nods. You're a woman now, she says, like she's handing you a sack of bricks. You feel no older, only sore. She gives you a rag and shows you how to fold it, tuck it in. It's scratchy and stiff, but it's all you've got. She tells you the bleeding will come once a month, unless you're pregnant. Then she says nothing else, like that's the end of the lesson. In some ways, it is. You don't talk about it again, not with her, not with anyone. You just learn to deal. You learn how to hide the stains, how to keep moving when it feels like your bones are leaking, how to pretend nothing's happening even as your body reminds you over and over that you are now a vessel. You begin to understand why the older girls move differently, more carefully, with more layers, more silence. You begin to understand the fear in their glances. Because now, if something happens to you, anything, they'll blame your body for it. Too much hip, too much breast, too much red. Here's your historical fact. In Tudor England, menstruation was poorly understood and often feared. Many believed it was a purging of bad humours, and thought menstruating women were spiritually unclean or physically dangerous. Some said a woman on her period could spoil meat just by looking at it. Others claimed that bread wouldn't rise in her presence. There were no sanitary products, no medical support, no forgiveness, just cloth, shame and endurance. Fringe fact, some women carried dried herbs, especially sage, yarrow or mugwort to ease cramps or reduce bleeding. Others swallowed powdered toadstone or wore amulets tied around their waists. One particularly creative midwife supposedly advised young girls to press cold cabbage leaves against their lower bellies to quiet the womb. You've tried none of these, yet. But cabbage is easy to come by, so who knows? There's a scholarly debate about how much autonomy women had during menstruation in Tudor times. Some argue that women had private networks of support. Folk remedies passed down through generations shared wisdom in a world that ignored them. Others believe menstruation was used as yet another tool of control, a way to frame women as unstable, irrational or weak. Either way, the message was clear. This was something to hide. You try your best. You change the cloth when you can, usually in the woods, away from prying eye and nose. You bury the stained ones behind the chicken coop when they're too soiled to scrub clean. Your mother never asks where they go. She just makes more, folding old linens into neat squares with a look that says, this is how it's always been. But bleeding is only part of it. Your hunger changes too. Deep, sharp, demanding. You crave meat, bread, warmth, touch, not just food. Contact. You lie awake some nights, sweating, flushed, limbs restless, unsure if what you're feeling is fear, desire, or both tangled into something electric and strange. And then there's the other thing. The constant, inescapable pressure. From the village, from your family, from your own skin. You'll be married soon, someone says again. It'll be easier with a husband. They make it sound like a promise. You know it's a sentence. Anne, yes, that Anne, is now a mother. You saw her last week, rocking a red-faced infant on her lap, eyes sunken with sleeplessness. She smiled when she saw you, but it was the smile of someone who's too tired to lie. You asked if the baby was healthy. She said, he cries. Then she blinked slowly, like that was the only thing she had the strength to say. You wonder if that will be you. Soon, a belly full of someone else's child, your world shrunk to the size of a cradle. Your mother sits you down one evening and begins talking, not about love or dreams or what you want, but about pain. It hurts, she says plainly. It tears. You scream, but then it's done. She's talking about childbirth and her face is like stone. She doesn't soften it for you. She just lays the truth down like a dead animal on the table. If the babe comes fast, thank the Lord. If it takes days, you pray you don't die before it ends. You ask if she was scared. She says, I still am. Here's another thing no one tells you. There's no relief, no break. You might bleed for 30 years. You might carry 10 children and bury 5. You might suffer quietly, leak quietly, die quietly, and still someone will call you lucky for having strong hips. One of the older women in the village, Maud, tells you in passing that the midwife carries a bone-handled knife she keeps wrapped in cloth. For the ones who don't survive, she says, to get the baby out. She says it like she's talking about peeling an apple. You ask if it's ever been used. She just nods, once, twice, probably more. You think about that knife sometimes, when you're lying in bed, sore and bleeding, wondering if your stomach is supposed to cramp like this, wondering if your back is supposed to feel like it's trying to snap in half. You wonder if the pain is normal, or if something's already going wrong inside you. But you don't say anything. Who would you say it to? The first time someone stares too long at your chest, you feel both proud and sick. The second time, you tug your cloak tighter. By the fifth time, you're walking with your arms crossed over your ribs. You've learned how to fade, to look useful, not pretty, to keep your eyes down and your shoulders square, to bleed quietly, smile when spoken to, and pretend the wolf isn't at the door. But you feel it there, waiting, and you know what it wants. In Tudor England, your body is no longer yours. It belongs to blood, to marriage, to childbirth, to death. You just get to live in it until it breaks. You're 16 now, and if you haven't learned to love the church, you've at least learned to obey it. You kneel when told, murmur the prayers by rote, and cross yourself so often it's muscle memory. The church is everywhere, looming over your village in the form of a squat stone chapel, echoing from the priest's booming voice every Sunday, stamped on every coin, calendar and moment of your life. It tells you when to fast, when to feast, who to marry, what to believe, and more importantly, what not to. In Tudor England, religion isn't a belief system, it's infrastructure. You wake to the tolling of bells, not always for joy, sometimes for death, sometimes to announce mass, sometimes to call a soul to judgment. Today it's a feast day, and you're expected to dress in your best being a patched-over tunic that smells slightly less like smoke than usual. Your mother braids your hair tightly, muttering prayers to St. Apollonia as she tugs. Your scalp stings, but you say nothing. Better to arrive at church looking God-fearing than get caught looking dishevelled. You remember what happened to the cooper's wife when she came in late with her shawl inside out. People still whisper. The church isn't just a building. It's a surveillance system. It watches. It reports. It punishes. The priest knows everyone's sins before they know they've committed them. You've seen it happen. A girl goes to confession and he ends up whipped for impure thoughts. A man fails to pay his tithe and suddenly finds his name carved into a wooden board hung in the square. Public shame is as much a part of religion as prayer. Still, you know the rituals. You recite the Latin words, though you barely understand them. You kneel on aching joints, stand on command, bow when expected. You light candles for the dead, for St. Catherine, for your brother, who hasn't been seen since he left to find work in the city. You don't know if he's alive, but you light the candle anyway. Here's your historical fact, diez. During the Tudor period, England underwent massive religious upheaval. Henry VIII's break from the Catholic Church led to the formation of the Church of England, a move that would change the landscape of religion, politics, and daily life for generations. Ordinary people were often caught in the chaos, forced to adapt as laws changed, rituals shifted, and allegiance to Rome turned into treason. One year you might be fined for not attending Mass, the next for attending the wrong one. Your fringe fact. Some villagers secretly held on to old Catholic relics, tiny statues of saints, rosary beads, scraps of Latin prayers hidden under floorboards or sewn into clothes. You once saw a boy kiss the feet of a wooden Virgin Mary during Lent. His mother slapped him hard across the face, looking around as if the walls had eyes. Maybe they did. The bishop's men were always watching. There's still scholarly debate about how much ordinary people cared about the Reformation. Some argue it barely touched the lives of rural folk. Mass was mass, no matter who was king. Others believe these shifts were felt deeply, especially among the devout who had to watch their churches be stripped of icons, their prayers rewritten, their holy days erased. What is certain is that religion wasn't optional. Even doubt had consequences. You've learned to keep your beliefs flexible. If the priest says we burn candles for St. Peter, you nod. If the next week it's St. Paul, you nod again. When someone in the square says too loudly that saints are idolatry, you suddenly forget how to nod at all. You're just trying not to get noticed. Sometimes, though, the church offers comfort. The smell of beeswax candles, the warmth of bodies packed into pews on cold mornings, The chant of the psalms echoing off stone. It feels ancient, powerful, like you're part of something older than plague, colder than winter. Something unkillable. When your sister was sick, you sat in the chapel alone and whispered prayers to saints you'd never met. She survived. You thanked them all, even the ones who weren't supposed to count anymore. Your priest is an old man with a voice like a cracked bell and breath that smells of onions and authority. He's strict but not cruel. He keeps a ledger of everyone's sins and deeds, real or suspected. He once made a boy confess to stealing before the theft even happened, just based on a look in his eyes. You've memorised that look, if only to avoid it. You've also seen what happens when someone doesn't obey. Old Agnes, the herbalist, once refused to come to Mass. Said her legs hurt too much. Next thing you know, she's being questioned for sorcery. You saw her standing in the square, hands tied, shivering as the priest lectured her on obedience. She was lucky. They let her go with a warning and a fine. If she does it again, everyone knows she won't be so lucky next time. You've become good at blending in, at pretending. You cross yourself, kiss the Bible, bow at the right time, but there's a part of you, quiet, hidden, that wonders. Why must God be so angry? Why is joy forbidden and fear required? Why does holiness smell like smoke and sweat and punishment? But those thoughts are dangerous. They don't belong in the light. You bury them deep, behind the hymns and hallelujahs. You sing louder. You kneel faster. You say amen like you mean it. Still sometimes, in the woods alone, you whisper to the old saints, the ones with kind eyes and soft hands, the ones they told you to forget. You wonder if they hear you. You think maybe they do. In Tudor England, religion doesn't save you. It judges you, moulds you, follows you. It's the silence in your prayers and the eyes in the back of the chapel. It's mercy with conditions, grace with rules. It's everywhere and inescapable. So you say your prayers, and you don't ask too many questions. You're 17 now, and you've learnt to be careful about which herbs you touch, what you say about the moon, and who sees you helping your mother in the garden. There's a line you're not supposed to cross, and you're not even sure where it is, but you feel it all the time, like a thread across your ankles waiting to trip you. Healing someone can make you a saint. Healing someone too well can make you a witch. Your mother has always known the old ways, not loudly, not dangerously, just the things her mother taught her, and her mother before that. How to steep yarrow for fever. How to mash comfrey to soothe burns. How to wrap a stillbirth in rosemary to protect its soul on the way out. She does it with a quiet grace, speaking more to the plants than to you. People come to her in whispers behind hedges in the hush of dusk, and they leave with bundles of leaves or jars of thick salves and words they won't repeat. No one calls her a witch, not out loud, but they never meet her eyes at church. You've picked up some of the knowledge yourself, because of course you have. You've ground herbs between stones, dried roots in the sun, learned how to twist a cord just right to stop a bleeding arm. You've held babies slick with birth and watched them turn from grey to red in your arms. You've prayed over fevers and tied charms made of rowan to cribs. It feels like a kind of magic, but not the kind they accuse you of. It's survival. It's practical. It works. But lately that word, witch, has been crawling out of people's mouths more often. It's not always shouted. Sometimes it's just said like a joke, a whisper, a warning, after someone recovers too quickly, after someone's milk spoils too often, or when a cow births a calf with a crooked leg. Last month the baker's son went blind for a day, just a day, and his mother swore she saw Goody Harrow walking backward near their yard the night before. The boy's vision came back, but Goody hasn't been seen since. Here's your historical fact. Accusations of witchcraft in Tudor England were more about fear and control than magic. The mid to late 1500s saw a rise in paranoia around women, especially older, poor or outspoken women, being labelled as witches. Often these were healers, widows or loners who simply didn't conform. They were blamed for everything from spoiled milk to sudden storms. While actual executions for witchcraft were rarer in England than on the continent, trials and public shaming were terrifyingly common. And your fringe fact? One popular test for witches involved pricking the skin with needles. If you didn't bleed or feel pain, you were guilty. There were even professional witch prickers who travelled from town to town with special dull needles and a talent for theatrics. Another method involved tossing the accused into a river. If you floated, you were a witch. If you sank, well, you were innocent and dead. Either way, not ideal. There's ongoing scholarly debate about whether these witch trials were truly driven by religious zeal or more by social tension. Land disputes, unpaid debts, personal grudges. Some argue that witchcraft accusations were a convenient way to dispose of inconvenient people. Others believe the fear was real, and that folk belief in curses and hexes ran deeper than we give credit for. Regardless, the danger was real for those on the receiving end of a pointed finger. You feel it now, that danger. It hums beneath your skin whenever someone glances your way after a child recovers from a cough that should have taken them. You feel it when a woman's labour goes smoother than expected and someone says, "Must be blessed." Blessed never feels far from cursed, and it's worse for midwives. Always has been. If a child dies, they're to blame. If it lives despite the odds, they're suspect. If it's born malformed, they were obviously in league with devils. You've helped with enough births now to know that luck plays as much a part as skill. But no one wants to blame God. It's easier to blame the woman who boiled the linens. Your mother has taught you how to walk that line. Don't take credit, don't promise too much, keep your head low. When you give someone herbs, say they're for comfort, not cure. Never mix powders in public, never speak Latin words, even if they're prayers, especially if they're prayers. And for the love of everything, never mention dreams. Still, you're drawn to the power of it. The way something as simple as a pinch of sage and vinegar can soothe a throat. How elderberry and honey can pull the fever from a child. There's a deep satisfaction in knowing the body can be helped, in not being entirely helpless against death. But the cost is always waiting. One wrong step, one wrong word, and you're suddenly not a healer anymore. You're a threat. You dream of fire sometimes. Not a hearth, but a stake. You wake up sweating, your hands clenched tight around your own shift like you're trying to rip it off before it burns. You've never told anyone. There's a woman in the next village over who was accused last winter. She was kept locked in the church crypt for a week, tied to a post fed only bread and water. No one came to visit her except the priest, and when she emerged there, her hair was white as ash and her hands trembled. No charges, just rumours now following her like smoke. Her house was burned down in an accident a month later. And yet people still come to your mother, still knock softly in the dark, still ask for help without saying the word. Because fear or not, sickness keeps coming, and prayer alone doesn't always stop a cough. You find yourself praying too, but not just to saints anymore, to the wind, to the moon, to the trees that have watched you grow and bend and bleed. You don't think that makes you wicked. You think it makes you honest. The world is wild and wide, and if it listens, then maybe it understands. In Tudor England, healing is holy until it works too well. Then it's heresy. You live in the space between those two truths, hands full of herbs, mouth full of silence, and you don't know how long you can stay balanced. You're 18 now, and for the first time in your life you see death as a performance. Not the quiet, behind-the-door kind you grew up with, infants swaddled and buried before they cooled, old men found still in their chairs, women who didn't wake after a hard birth. No, this is something else. This is execution. Public, deliberate, and disturbingly festive. It's market day, and word spread that someone's to be hanged. Or beheaded. No one's exactly sure. What is sure is that it's going to happen right there in the square, and everyone's acting like it's the May Fair. Ale's already flowing, children are chasing each other around the stocks, and the butcher's got a special tray of meat pies he only brings out for the good hangings. Even your father's in a better mood than usual. You don't want to go, but not going looks suspicious, and suspicion is the first step toward being in the noose yourself. So you stand in the crowd, cold mud underfoot, someone's elbow jammed into your side, and you wait to see someone die. The condemned is a young man, younger than you. His hands are bound, his face is hollow, and his clothes are torn in a way that tells you no one cared how he looked for this final appearance. Someone shouts that he's a thief, another says he killed a pig, a third swears he looked funny at the vicar's niece. You doubt anyone actually knows. It doesn't matter. The punishment's the same. The hangman wears a grimy hood and chews something constantly. He's efficient, professional even. The rope is already looped, the platform already slick with morning dew. He doesn't make a speech, just yanks the condemned up, nods once to the crowd and pulls the lever. The body drops, the rope snaps, the crowd gasps, then cheers. You stare sick and motionless as the boy twitches, his heels scrabbling at the air like they're trying to find solid ground. They don't. Then stillness. Someone nearby starts selling walnuts. Life, apparently, goes on. Here's your historical fact. Public executions were a central part of Tudor criminal justice. The goal wasn't just punishment. It was deterrence, theatre, and control. Depending on the crime, you might be hanged, burned, beheaded, boiled, or have your ears cut off first for good measure. Executions were held in marketplaces, crossroads, and sometimes on hills to make sure as many people saw as possible. Children came, merchants sold treats, it was civic entertainment wrapped in terror. Fringe fact, executed criminals' body parts were often displayed afterward. Heads on spikes, hands nailed to doors, torsos left to rot in cages called gibbets. People believed this not only warned others, but also kept the spirit of the criminal from rising. Some even thought a thief's hand, dried and powdered, could be used in spells to stop blood or silence crying infants. You haven't seen a severed hand yet, but you know someone who says they did. Once, just a blackened thing nailed above a tavern. There's scholarly debate over whether these public executions truly worked as deterrents. Some historians argue they desensitized people to violence. Others say they reinforced the power of the state through spectacle. What's clear is that fear kept people in line as much as faith did. A noose around the neck made a better sermon than most priests. Afterward, the crowd disperses quickly. You notice no one really talks about what just happened. Not directly. They talk about how quick it was, how he didn't scream, how it could have been worse. But not him, not his name. He's already fading into rumour like he never existed. That's what a public death does. It turns a person into a warning. You don't eat lunch that day. The butcher's tray still smells like the square. Later that week, a woman is put in the stocks for scandalous words. She called the alderman a sheep-faced liar during a tavern spat. Now she sits with her arms locked above her head while children throw rotten vegetables at her. One boy throws a dead rat. She spits at them and curses so fluently it almost sounds like poetry. Your stomach turns, not from the smell, but because part of you envies her anger. You wish you were brave enough to curse out loud. You ask your mother what she remembers of executions when she was young. She says, "They used to boil them, you know, in oil. At least hanging's quicker." You don't ask for details. She gives them anyway. One man took 10 minutes to die, screamed until he couldn't scream anymore. Then she goes back to stirring the pot like she just commented on the weather. Everyone has a story like that. A memory, a cousin who vanished, a woman burned, a priest who spoke Latin when he shouldn't have. And always it ends with, "So be careful," but you know it's not always about what you do. Sometimes it's about being in the wrong place with the wrong face or the wrong past. Sometimes it's nothing at all, just a crowd hungry for someone to watch die. You avoid the square for a while after that. The platform is gone, but the stain remains, dark and rotted into the wood like a bruise that won't fade. A few chickens scratch around it, pecking at something invisible. One day someone spills a basket of apples there and no one picks them up. Not even the pigs. You don't know what crime the boy committed. Maybe he did steal something. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just looked too much like someone who might one day do something wrong. Whatever it was, it didn't save him, and it won't save you. Because in Tudor England, justice is swift, public, and often fatal. You don't survive by being innocent. You survive by being invisible. So you keep your head down. And you don't look too long at the platform. You're 19 now, and if the village were somehow turned into a human body, the doctor would be the left pinky toe. Unnoticed until stubbed. Not particularly useful, but still better than losing it entirely. That's not to say you've seen a doctor lately. Most folks here haven't. You might go your whole life without meeting one, and if you do, there's a fair chance they'll do more harm than good. Still, people speak of them with reverence, as if their feathered hats and Latin phrases make them something just shy of divine. The truth, Tudor medicine is less science and more educated guessing, but with knives. And astrology. A shocking amount of astrology. When you get sick, your first stop isn't the doctor, it's your mother, or the midwife, or the wise woman who lives near the hollow tree. They'll rub something on you, give you something to drink, mutter something to the saints or to the wind. Only when things look truly dire, your tongue black, your eyes glassy, your body limp like boiled cabbage, does someone suggest sending for the physician in the next town. And even then, there's hesitation. Mostly because no one can afford it, and also because the doctor's last visit involved a man being bled until he passed out and never woke up again. You once saw a physician, just once. He rode into the village on a chestnut horse, his robe fluttering like a tent, his gloves soft and white. He smelled like cloves and importance. Everyone stepped back like he was made of gold. He dismounted slowly, then proceeded to examine a sick girl by sniffing the air, glancing at her tongue and consulting a star chart. Then he prescribed boiled leeks and the bleeding of the left arm. She died 2 days later. Here's your historical fact. Most Tudor physicians were university trained, but their education focused heavily on ancient texts, especially the works of Galen and Hippocrates, rather than hands-on experience. Dissection was rare and sometimes illegal. So much of what they knew was theory. 4 humours, blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, planetary alignments, and the balance of heat and moisture in the body. If you had too much of one, they'd bleed you. Too much of another? Time for vomits, purges or poultices. And your fringe fact. Some medical treatments involved placing a live pigeon against the soles of a fevered patient's feet, or making a paste of ground emeralds for stomach cramps. Others recommended pressing raw veal to the forehead to relieve headaches. There's even a record of using powdered mummy, yes, actual Egyptian mummies, as a cure-all, though that was more common among the wealthier sort. The dead helping the dying, grim but poetic. There's fierce debate among historians about whether Tudor medicine made people better, or just killed them more slowly. Some argue that folk remedies, those practiced by unlicensed women and village healers, were often more effective than official treatments. Others insist that without modern understanding of bacteria, infection, or anatomy, even the best educated physician was operating in the dark. The truth is likely somewhere in between, a mix of genuine good intentions, wild superstition, and a dash of luck. You've been bled once. It was for a fever that wouldn't break. They used a curved blade and a small bowl. You remember the sickly sweet smell of your own blood as it pooled. You remember feeling faint and colder than you thought possible. But the fever passed. Whether from the blade or from time, no one can say. Another time you had a toothache so terrible you thought your head would split. The wise woman gave you a clove to chew and whispered something in your ear, half prayer, half lullaby. The pain dulled enough for you to sleep. You still have that tooth. It's grey, chipped, and feels slightly loose, but it's there. And more importantly, you're here. A neighbour boy wasn't so lucky. He got the sweating sickness, a sudden vicious fever that struck fast and killed faster. He died within a day. The priest called it God's punishment. The herbalist said it was the summer heat. The physician, who arrived far too late, said something about corrupted air and an imbalance of moisture in the liver. Everyone nodded solemnly. No one really knew anything. Illness is a shadow that never leaves. You feel it when your joints ache, when your belly cramps, when your skin flushes for no reason. It's always there, waiting. You don't go to bed thinking about dreams. You go to bed hoping not to wake up with boils or blisters or blood in your stool. Survival isn't health, it's the absence of obvious death. You've seen childbirth go wrong. You've watched infection bloom from a simple cut. You've seen people die of things you now suspect were easily curable, if only someone had known what they were doing. But no one does. They're guessing. Even the ones with fancy cloaks and expensive gloves. Still, hope is hard to kill. People want to believe in the doctor. They want to believe in remedies and cures. You've seen men hand over their last coin for a jar of yellow powder that might be mustard, might be crushed bone, might be nothing at all. You've seen mothers weep with joy when their child's fever breaks after a poultice, convinced it was the herbs, not time or chance. And maybe it was the herbs, or maybe faith is the strongest medicine you have. You've learnt not to scoff at any of it, because sometimes the strangest things work, and when they don't, at least they give people something to hold on to. In Tudor England, the doctor might save you, or kill you, or bleed you dry and call it healing. So you press the clove to your aching tooth, you drink the bitter tea, you whisper thanks to the saints and the stars, and you wait for the fever to pass, because sometimes that's the best medicine there is. You're 20 now, and you've started to realise that most things in Tudor life blur the line between terror and entertainment. This hits home on a Sunday when the church bells stop ringing and the bear starts roaring. Not in a dream, not in the forest, in the square, tethered to a post, muzzled, but only just. It's bear baiting day. You'd hoped it was a rumour. You'd heard whispers the night before about a travelling troupe, a few dogs with strong jaws, and a bear named Old Samson brought all the way from the south. But part of you didn't believe it until you saw the crowd. Everyone's there. Children on shoulders, grandmothers pressed up to the front, eyes alight. Even the priest, arms crossed, trying to look disapproving while clearly trying not to smile. The bear is enormous, shaggy, scarred and angry. He paces the circle, chain jangling with every step. His handler struts around in a feathered hat, cracking jokes and swinging a long stick like a sceptre. "Gentle folk of the parish," he cries, "I give you strength, I give you fury, I give you sport." You can't look away. No one can. Then come the dogs, 4 of them, lean and snarling, each led on a rope and clearly half-starved to whip up the crowd. The moment they're loose, the air changes. It's not just excitement, it's bloodthirst. The dogs leap. The bear turns, teeth clash, the crowd roars. You stand at the back, eyes wide, one hand half covering your mouth. There's fur flying, chain snapping, blood, so much blood, and it's not always clear who it belongs to. One dog yelps and goes down, ribs exposed like broken fence posts. Another hangs off the bear's ear until the handler slaps it free with the flat of his blade. Eventually, the dogs retreat, panting and bloodied. The bear lumbers back toward its post, foaming at the mouth. The crowd cheers. Ale is passed around. A child throws a penny. Someone shouts, "Next Sunday we get the bull!" Here's your historical fact. Bear baiting was one of the most popular forms of entertainment in Tudor England, especially in urban centres like London, but also in villages lucky, or unlucky, enough to afford travelling troops. It involved chaining a bear, or sometimes a bull, to a stake and setting dogs upon it for sport. Royalty attended these events. Queen Elizabeth I herself was a noted fan. It was brutal, messy and wildly celebrated. Fringe fact, the handlers sometimes dressed the bears in costumes, crowns, cloaks, even a mock armour, for comic effect. Some trained them to dance before the fight, usually by heating the ground beneath their paws or using pokers to goad them into hopping. In certain cases, if a bear survived many matches, it was given a name and became something of a celebrity. Old Samson, if he lives long enough, might be just that. There's debate among historians about why Tudor folk loved such violent spectacle. Some say it was a way to confront death in a controlled setting, a kind of emotional rehearsal for the constant loss of the age. Others argue it was class warfare in costume, a safe outlet for the suppressed rage of peasants, or a show of dominance by landlords who could afford to sponsor blood sport. One thing's clear, it was never just entertainment, it was power made visible. And it wasn't just animals. Human punishment was part of the same show. The stocks are set up right beside the bear pit, after all. Earlier that day, a thief was locked in by the neck and wrists and left to bake under the midday sun while children pelted him with overripe fruit. A woman accused of gossip, just gossip, was ducked into the river 3 times, tied to a stool. People cheered. No one helped. It's all theatre. You realise that now. Pain and humiliation as a shared event. The bear isn't just a bear, it's a symbol of rage, of chaos barely leashed. And the dogs, that's the world, always snapping at your heels. Later that night, when the square is empty, you walk past the blood-stained straw. It's sticky beneath your boots. You can still smell it, iron and sweat and fur. You pass the stocks, now empty. There's a smear of something dark on the wood. You wonder if it's fruit or blood or both. You sit for a while on the edge of the square, thinking. The image of the bear flashes behind your eyes, its breath visible in the cold, its back arched, its eyes wide. You think about the noise of the crowd, how easy it is to lose yourself in it, how quickly laughter becomes a roar. You've seen the same crowd at weddings, at funerals, at hangings, and it always sounds the same. A collective hum of hunger, for story, for judgment, for something to feel. The next day a man in the village boasts that he touched the bear's paw, claims it's good luck. Someone else says it's cursed. You say nothing. A few nights later a travelling juggler shows up and performs outside the tavern. He lights a torch, swallows it whole and spits fire. The crowd claps politely, but you can tell, they're bored. No blood, no screaming, no bite. You begin to understand that in Tudor England, entertainment isn't just a way to pass the time, it's a way to survive it, a shared madness, a moment of control in a world where nothing else bends to your will. So you laugh when they laugh, cheer when they cheer, you drink the ale, you smile, but you don't go near the bear pit again. You're 21 now, and you've finally made it to the coast. You stand on the edge of the world, or at least the edge of England, with your cloak flapping in the wind, the smell of salt thick enough to taste. This isn't a holiday. No one in Tudor England takes those, not really. You're here because someone needed help unloading cargo at the port and you needed the coin. So here you are, lungs full of brine and tar smoke, watching the chaos of a harbour that never truly sleeps. The port is alive, not like a village is alive, quiet, seasonal, half asleep in winter. This is a different kind of pulse. Ships creak and groan as men shout in a dozen accents. Barrels roll, nets slap the ground, heavy with fish, and something that might not be fish. The dock sways under your boots, slick with seaweed and waste. There are gulls screaming above and rats darting below, and tucked into every corner, men with knives in their belts and secrets in their eyes. You're told not to ask too many questions, especially not about the crates that don't get inspected, or the men who arrive one day and vanish the next. You're here to carry and keep quiet, and if you want to keep your nose attached to your face, you'll do exactly that. There's a sickness spreading, again. They say it came from a ship out of Calais. Others swear it was the Dutch traders, or the Italian sailors, or a cursed monk who coughed on a barrel of wine. No one really knows, but every third person on the docks is wearing a cloth over their mouth, soaked in vinegar or rosewater, and the baker in town is already dead. People are still buying his bread, though. Waste not, want not. Here's your historical fact. Tudor ports were gateways for trade and for disease. Ships carried goods, people, and pests in equal measure. Outbreaks of plague, typhus, and other illnesses often began in port towns. The authorities sometimes attempted crude quarantines, posting guards or marking infected homes, but it rarely worked. Disease travelled faster than rumour, and by the time someone started coughing, it was usually too late. And your fringe fact: in some port cities, ship rats were considered omens. A black rat running inland meant death was coming. A rat seen fleeing a ship before docking was a sign that the vessel carried sickness, or that it had carried it before and lost half its crew. Sailors swore by rat behaviour the way priests swore by scripture. You saw 3 rats scurry off a ship this morning, and promptly decided not to carry any barrels from that particular deck. There's a scholarly debate about how much port workers understood disease transmission. Some argue they had no idea, blaming illness on bad air, foreign curses, or sin. Others believe that sailors and dock workers had a kind of streetwise knowledge. Not medical, but practical. They might not know about bacteria, but they knew which ships to avoid, which captains were cursed, and which cargoes brought to death. You work with a man named Jack who's missing 2 fingers and claims he survived the sweating sickness by drinking nothing but seawater and eating a clove of garlic every hour. You don't believe him, but you eat the garlic anyway. You're not taking chances. He gives you a tip. If a ship smells too sweet, avoid it. It means they've tried to cover something up. Death has a scent, and sailors have learned to recognise it. At night, the port changes. Torches flicker, shadows stretch, and voices drop to whispers. That's when the smugglers come. They slip through alleyways and under docks like fish through reeds, always grinning, always armed. You know better than to look them in the eye. Some of them smuggle goods, silk, wine, spices. Others smuggle people. Women, mostly. A few boys. No one talks about it, but everyone knows. One night you hear a scream from the cargo sheds, short, sharp, cut off too fast to echo. No one moves, no one mentions it. The next day a new shipment arrives and everything continues. You begin to understand that ports are places where the rules blur. The sea doesn't care about the laws of men. Neither do the men who live by it. You see things you don't fully understand, symbols chalked onto barrels, men making strange gestures when passing certain ships, a foreign sailor who throws salt behind him before stepping onto land. Superstition runs deeper here than in the countryside. The ocean is a god, and it's an angry one. You earn enough coin to eat well for a week, better than you've eaten in months. Fresh fish, baked loaves, even fruit off a Spanish ship. You feel almost alive again. Then a sailor vomits blood in the alley beside the tavern, and just like that, your appetite vanishes. You consider leaving, heading back inland, back to cold nights and muddy fields and the quiet misery you know, but something about the sea holds you here. Not joy, not freedom, but a kind of clarity. Here, life is stripped bare. No saints to save you, no lords to protect you, just salt, steel and chance. You sleep near the docks, wrapped in a cloak that smells like fish oil and sweat. You dream of waves swallowing ships whole. You wake up with a start and check your skin for boils. So far, nothing. In Tudor England, the ports bring goods, news and fortune, but they also bring terrible death. And the sea never forgets. You're 22 now, and the Queen has the pox. Not a village girl, not some washerwoman or servant, the Queen, Elizabeth herself. They say she's locked away in her chambers, her skin blotched and blistered, eyes swollen shut, attendants too afraid to breathe near her. Some say she's already dead and they're just trying to figure out who to blame. Others swear she's recovering through some magical ointment blessed by a bishop and a Hungarian physician with one eye and a gold tooth. Either way, the message is clear. Even royalty can't outrun Tudor England. When a monarch gets sick, the entire kingdom flinches, not because of sympathy, though some pretend, but because their sickness trickles down like rain through a leaky roof. No clear air? That means civil unrest. Factions, claims, armed cousins, the return of war maybe. You've seen what happens when people get hungry and scared. All it takes is one noble shouting in the wrong direction and suddenly everything burns. But smallpox isn't political, not really. It's personal. It's a tiny invisible siege laid against the fortress of your body. You've seen it before, you've watched it turn skin into ruin, leaving survivors with scars so deep their faces look like burned parchment. Or they don't survive. That's often quicker. In your village it arrives quiet. A traveller, a handshake, a cough. Then the rash, then the heat, then the panic. One girl is locked inside her home, her mother slipping her barley water through the shutter. No priest visits, no neighbours bring stew, they just wait. If the family lives, everyone pretends they never got sick. If they die, the house gets burned and the field ploughed under. You remember being told as a child that smallpox was God's way of marking the proud. It humbles the face to someone said, a brutal phrase for a brutal disease, but the poor aren't proud, and yet they suffer the same. You've watched children cough until their throats gave out. You've helped dig graves with hands blistered from shoveling half-frozen dirt. You've wiped pus from cheeks so swollen the eyes disappear completely. Here's your historical fact. Smallpox was one of the deadliest diseases in Tudor England, responsible for countless deaths and lifelong disfigurement. It spared no one, not peasants, not nobles, not even monarchs. Queen Elizabeth did in fact contract smallpox in 1562 and barely survived. The experience left her marked, both physically and politically. For those who survived, the scars were permanent and often socially defining. And your fringe fact? Some believe that red cloth wrapped tightly around the wrists would draw the illness out of the body. Others tried whispering prayers directly into the patient's ear while burning feathers on the bed. One particularly strange remedy involved grinding dried toads into powder and mixing it with mother's milk. Even stranger, some people claimed that reading the Psalms backward at midnight while staring into a mirror would frighten the pox away. You've never tried that one, but after a certain number of deaths you begin to consider even the absurd. There's a scholarly debate about the extent of isolation during outbreaks. Some argue Tudor villagers practiced informal quarantines, understanding instinctively that closeness spread disease. Others believe most people simply accepted sickness as part of the natural order, and didn't alter behaviour much unless panic set in. In your experience, it depends on the fear level. If it's a mild fever, you're given broth. If it pox, your door is barred with a plank and a cross is chalked on the wall. What terrifies people about smallpox isn't just the dying, it's the aftermath. The living reminder. A face like melted wax, eyes ringed in scars, skin that can't quite forget what it endured. A woman in your village named Bess used to be known for her beauty. One outbreak later, children crossed the road to avoid her. She pretends not to notice, but you've seen her staring into puddles with a tightness around her mouth that wasn't there before. And then there's the Queen. Rumour has it that since her illness, she refuses to be seen without paint on her face. Thick, chalky white lead mixed with vinegar. It cracks when she smiles, so she doesn't smile much anymore. They say she wears a wig now too, lost her hair in the fever. Now no one knows where the Queen ends and the mask begins. You wonder if that's what survival looks like. Painted silence. You tend to a child who gets it. Not your child, just someone's cousin, left behind when his family fled. You keep him in the goat shed, change his rags, boil water until your hands are red. He burns with fever for 4 days, shaking so hard you have to wedge a stick between his teeth to stop him biting through his own tongue. When the pustules come, they cover everything, face, chest, arms, inside the mouth, even the soles of his feet. You sing to him when he screams, there's nothing else to do. On the 6th day, he goes quiet. You hold his hand all night, waiting for the stillness to deepen. By some miracle it doesn't. He lives, but barely. And when he opens his eyes, they're clouded. You don't know if he can still see you. No one thanks you. His family returns once the fever breaks and pretends he never left. They take him back without a word. You watch him limp away, eyes fixed on the ground, face already changing. You return to your home and burn your clothes. Then you vomit into the grass from the smoke and the fear. You've survived another brush with death, but you don't feel stronger, just thinner, more frayed. In Tudor England, disease doesn't just take your life. Sometimes it leaves you behind in pieces, and sometimes it leaves you with a mirror you can't bear to look into. You're 23 now, and the cold hits different this year. It doesn't just settle into your bones, it burrows. It wraps itself around your ribs and presses into the spaces behind your eyes. The village is quieter, greyer. The smoke from hearth fires rising in thin, desperate threads. Winter always feels long in Tudor England, but this one feels like it's never going to end. You can smell the season before it arrives, the scent of damp wool, rotting apples, smoke soaked into skin. The leaves fall faster than usual, and the sun starts dipping early, leaving afternoons that feel like twilight. People wrap themselves in whatever they can find, blankets made of flour sacks, cloaks that smell like mould. You sleep in all your clothes at once and still wake up with stiff fingers and a nose that feels more like ice than flesh. Food starts running low by November. The harvest was meagre, thanks to a summer that felt more like spring, too wet, too soft. There's talk that the grain from the next village is infested with weevils, and the root cellar has already sprouted mildew in 2 corners. Your family starts rationing by candlelight, 1 heel of bread per person, a ladle of cabbage water with more water than cabbage. You chew slowly, pretending not to notice your stomach arguing with itself. Then the deaths begin. They always do. Not from disease this time. Not first, anyway. Just from cold and not enough. Old John, who always slept in the church porch, is found frozen stiff with a crust of snow in his beard. A child is pulled from the river. Her hands raw from trying to break the ice. You wrap your cloak tighter and tell yourself you're still lucky, still breathing. Here's your historical fact. Winters during the Tudor period could be brutally harsh, especially during what we now call the Little Ice Age, a period of cooler than usual climate that led to widespread crop failure and hunger. Poor insulation, inadequate clothing, and a reliance on unpredictable agriculture meant that winter was, quite literally, deadly for the lower classes. Starvation and exposure were as real a threat as any plague. Your fringe fact? Some people slept with heated stones or live chickens tucked under their cloaks to keep warm. In extreme cases, families slept together in one bed, huddled like spoons, fully dressed, with dogs thrown in for extra warmth. You've done that. Last week, in fact. You, your sister, your cousin, and a mangy mutt with one eye who smelled like wet peat. And you were grateful for him. There's debate among historians about whether communities banded together in times of hardship or turned inward. Some records show shared bread, open hearths and communal meals. Others point to theft, hoarding and violence. In your experience, it's both. Someone might give you the last of their turnips in the morning and steal your cloak that night. Survival has no consistent morality. Work doesn't stop, of course. It never does. Even when the ground is too frozen to till, there are animals to tend, water to haul, fires to stoke. You gather kindling until your fingers crack and bleed. You help drag the wood sled back from the woods, your legs trembling under the weight. The sun sets by 4 and then you sit by the fire, watching the last ember like it's a sacred relic. The church is full these days. People pray harder when their teeth chatter. The priest speaks of trials and virtue and of Job. But everyone's eyes are on the brazier near the altar. You go, not for the scripture, but for the warmth. It's one of the few places where the wind doesn't whistle through the cracks in the wall. There's 1 candle left in your home. 1. You save it for Christmas, not for celebration, for light. Actual, literal light. Your family agrees, in a quiet, grim consensus, to go to bed earlier and earlier to make the oil stretch. Some nights you're asleep before the last crow lands in the tree. When a new baby is born in December, no one cheers, no one sings, the mother looks exhausted and terrified. You help swaddle the infant, your hands clumsy with cold. You want to say something kind, but all you can think about is whether there will be enough milk for one more. You dream strange things in winter. Hungry things. You dream of meat pies, warm hearths, of your feet not feeling like bricks. You wake up with a dry mouth and the taste of ashes. The fire went out again. One boy freezes in his sleep. He wasn't old, he wasn't sick, just cold enough for long enough. And the worst part, it doesn't shock anyone. They shake their heads and mutter something about how he always wore thin boots, like it was his fault, like any of us would choose this. Still, there are moments, tiny flashes of humanity. Someone smuggles you a slice of apple, dried and sweet. Your sister finds a piece of coal and draws a smiley face on the hearth. You laugh for the first time in days. You patch your boots with rabbit fur and feel like a genius. One night the stars come out, and the frost glitters so beautifully it hurts to look at. You stand outside with a blanket around your shoulders and realise the cold is part of you now. It has worked itself into your breath, your bones, your voice. In Tudor England, winter doesn't knock. It kicks the door in and settles down like a debt collector. And if you're not careful, it doesn't leave come spring, so you light the last candle and you wait. You're 24 now, and for the first time in your life you hear someone say a thing that stops you cold. Don't bother reading it. He can't. Not with cruelty, just matter of fact, like someone noting the sky is grey. And they're right, of course, you can't. Neither can most of the people in your village. Not truly. You can make out the odd sign, maybe copy your name if you really focus. But when it comes to actual reading, script, letters, pages, you might as well be looking at the markings of a bird's feet in the snow. That fact has never stung before. Why would it? You've had other things to worry about. Things like food, warmth, boils, marriage, not dying in your sleep from a bad wind. But today it stings, because the man who says it is holding a letter. A sealed one, and the letter is for you. He hands it over with a shrug like it doesn't matter, and walks away. You hold the thing in your hands, turning it over. The wax seal is cracked. Inside is paper, smooth and curled, and inked with words that seem almost to move on their own. Squiggles, lines, loops. The voice of someone far away, now silenced by your own ignorance. You sit on a stone, heart pounding, and realise you don't know what it says. And worse, you don't know anyone you trust to read it for you. Your neighbour could. He served in a manor house once, but he charges a penny for every letter, and the baker's son, he can sound out words, but he's got a mouth like a leaking bucket. Your secrets would be halfway across the village before the ink dried. So you fold the letter back up, tuck it into your tunic, and pretend you never got it. Whatever it was meant to tell you, news of a cousin, an offer of work, a death, you'll never know. Here's your historical fact. In Tudor England, literacy rates were staggeringly low, especially among the poor. While some men learned basic reading in youth through church or trade apprenticeships, the majority, especially women, never learned at all. Reading was tied to privilege, and writing even more so. It was a mark of status, access, and education. If you could sign your name instead of making an X, people looked at you differently. Your fringe fact? Some people paid for letters to be read aloud in taverns, usually by someone with shaky morals and a theatrical voice. Imagine having your private grief or joy performed with ale sloshing in the background and half the crowd laughing at the words they barely understand. Privacy didn't exist in a world where knowledge cost extra. There's a debate among scholars about how much illiteracy truly limited the Tudor poor. Some argue that oral culture, songs, stories, shared memory, was a powerful alternative to written text. Others suggest that literacy was a gatekeeping force, keeping the poor dependent on the literate elite for everything from land leases to Bible interpretation. One thing is certain, knowledge wasn't free, and without it you moved through life half blind. You begin to notice it everywhere now, the way the priest reads from the pulpit while everyone else just bows their heads and trusts, the way merchants scribble marks on parchment when they sell you something as if to trap you in ink, the way nobles wave letters like weapons. You see that not being able to read is like missing a sense, like not tasting your food or seeing the stars. And the worst part? You want to know, not for books or poems or love letters, but for survival. You want to read the signs posted at the town edge warning of plague. You want to read the notice that says someone's been accused of theft. You want to read a letter that might tell you where your brother went or why your aunt never came home. You try, late at night. You find an old psalter someone left behind at the chapel, and you trace the letters with your fingertip. They don't behave. They shift. Your eyes blur. It's like trying to catch smoke with your hands. You copy them out with a stick in the dirt. A, B, C. Your hand cramps. The stick breaks. You start again. Your sister catches you once. She laughs, not cruelly, just surprised. Trying to be a priest, she teases. You tell her, trying not to die stupid. She stops laughing then. The local Lord Steward arrives in town mid-spring. He pins a notice to the post outside the tavern, written in deep dark ink. He reads it aloud once, quickly. It's something about taxes, or land, you think. The moment he leaves, a dozen people crowd around to look at it. No one can read it, but everyone pretends they can. Some nod like it makes sense. Others just stomp the ground and walk away. The words sit there for weeks, curling in the rain, fading in the sun, mocking you. One day you ask the priest to teach you. Quietly, privately. He narrows his eyes like he's weighing the value of the request against the trouble of granting it. Finally he says, "I'll teach you your name." You nod. It's a start. So he shows you. Just your name, each letter, drawn slow, like a brand. He makes you copy it again and again until your fingers ache and the ink blots your thumb. When you finish, he says, "That'll be a half loaf for my trouble." You give it, gladly. Now you know 7 letters. They belong to you. In Tudor England, knowledge isn't just power, it's permission to live, to decide, to understand. And tonight, for the first time, you scratch your name into the dirt outside your door and smile. Because now the world knows you are here. You're 25 now, and the strangest thing of all is that you're still alive. You're not sure how it happened. It wasn't some grand act of strength or wisdom or cleverness. You just kept waking up, kept trudging through seasons like a man pushing through mud. You endured things you never thought you could. Cold, hunger, blood, grief. And somehow you're still here. Scarred, tired, weathered like old wood, but standing. You sit outside your cottage one morning, a chill in the air and a crust of frost on the grass, and you realise something wild. You've outlived most of the people you grew up with. John is gone. Agnes too. The girl who once gave you a flower behind the chapel died in childbirth at 17. Even your father, the mountain of a man who used to chop wood shirtless in the snow, now lies in the earth behind the church, marked with a crooked stick and a name scrawled in fading charcoal. You never imagined yourself reaching this age. 25 felt old when you were 12. It felt mythic when you were 15 and coughing blood into a rag in a field full of dead sheep. But here you are, alive, yes, but not untouched. You walk with a limp from a badly healed break. You can't eat apples anymore. They make your jaw ache where your tooth rotted out. Your hearing is going in your left ear, and your dreams are haunted by faces you've buried, by the smell of infection, by the sound of the rope going taut in the square. Here's your historical fact. If you made it to 25 in Tudor England, you were doing unusually well. Average life expectancy at birth hovered around 35, but that's misleading. It accounts for high infant and child mortality. Survive childhood, and you might live to 50 or 60. But the threats never stopped. Disease, childbirth, accidents, starvation, war, and plain bad luck. And your fringe fact? Some people carried death tokens, tiny carved charms or bone beads marked with skulls and crosses, not to ward off brutal death, but to remind themselves that it was coming. Memento mori, remember you must die. You found one once in the dirt near the graveyard, worn smooth by fingers long turned to dust. You keep it now in your pocket, not for fear, just for company. There's a debate among scholars, modern ones, about whether Tudor people were truly more afraid of death than we are, or simply more familiar with it. Some argue that frequent exposure made it less terrifying. Others say it was always feared, only differently. What you know is this. You stopped fearing death a long time ago. Now you just resent the idea of dying before the harvest comes in or before the stew finishes boiling. It's not death you dread, it's the timing. You've picked up things over the years, little tricks, how to keep milk from souring too fast, and how to trap a rabbit with only twine and a bent branch, how to spot a fever before it spreads, how to make your way through a conversation with a noble without saying something that gets you flogged. These aren't the things priests or lords teach. They're the things learned by watching, failing, hurting, surviving. You don't call yourself wise. That word belongs to bearded men in robes. But when children in the village scrape their knees or lose a mother, or find themselves bleeding and scared, they come to you. Not for sermons, for truth. For clean water and cloth and someone who won't flinch at the sight of blood. One night a boy asked you if he'll live to your age. He's got scabs on his face and soot on his hands. You tell him yes. Not because you believe it, but because someone needs to. You think often about what you've seen. The bear, the execution, the child buried in the thaw, the queen's sickness, the way people shouted when they were dying or didn't shout at all. You remember the taste of dirt, the sound of pigs screaming in the market, the smell of blood on wet straw. These are your memories now, not poems or paintings or tales of courtly love, just raw moments, real and scarred. There's beauty too. You've seen it. The sky after a storm, a loaf rising in the hearth, a newborn gripping your finger, the sound of someone singing off key because they forgot life was terrible for a moment. You've laughed, full, ugly, joy-filled laughs. You've kissed someone and meant it. You've danced in a barn with muddy boots and aching knees. You've held hands with someone who wasn't afraid of your scars. And that's it, isn't it? That's the victory. Not that you survived everything, but that you managed to feel something between the blows. In Tudor England, survival isn't noble. It's messy, smelly, accidental. It's slipping through cracks. It's eating turnips in silence. It's burying your friends and then going back to your chores. But it's still survival. You light a fire and boil water. You peel a root and add salt. You listen to the wind and the crackle of wood. You scratch your name into the dirt again. 7 letters, still yours. You don't know what comes next. But for now, you've outlived the plague, the pox, the hunger, the fear. You're still here. And in a place like this, that might be the closest thing to a miracle you'll ever get. So here you are, at the edge of the story, curled up in your blanket or slumped in your chair, letting the last of Tudor England drift past your ears like chimney smoke. You made it through all 30 sections: filth, famine, superstition, sorrow, bear pits, and chamber pots. And if that wasn't enough of a reminder that human beings are bafflingly stubborn creatures, just look at yourself, still listening, still breathing, still somehow wanting more. You've survived plague pits and sleepless winters, rotting food and sketchy midwives. You've watched men cheer for executions like they were sporting events and seen women branded for healing too well. You've been hungry, hunted, frozen, and occasionally drunk on something vaguely resembling beer. And through it all, you've scraped out survival day by day, moment by moment, mostly by pretending you weren't completely terrified. Because here's the thing, Tudor life didn't come with instructions. No one handed you a manual. There were no 10 easy steps to not dying in a mud hut. You just woke up every day and hoped you could make it until nightfall. And if you were lucky enough to do that, you'd try again tomorrow. Somehow that passed for a life. You didn't become famous. You didn't invent the spinning wheel or get knighted by the Queen. You weren't a hero or a villain or a footnote in someone else's story. You were the story, just a quiet one. A breath between battles. A flicker of warmth in a cold century. And in a world that chewed through people like spoiled bread. That was extraordinary. So now, close your eyes, you've earned it. Let the sounds of the past fade into soft ash. Let the bear stop roaring and the priest stop preaching. Let the candle gutters out. The frost bite the windows, the world settle back into dark. You've outlasted the worst century you never asked to visit. And you did it with your boots on.